marvelous long reads.
After Dark Tower Beginning Saga, the link to which you can find in the description, I am back with the entire Dark Tower Gunslinger Saga. This time, Roland Deschain is the last living gunslinger of Gilead. The city has fallen and the Battle of Jericho Hill has eliminated Roland's quartet. So what awaits him now? The story of the Dark Tower is far from over, and the comics I'm going to cover today will chronicle the gunslinger's epic and almost never-ending journey to catch the Man in Black, spanning across 30 issues and 5 additional stories that capture Roland's experience and growth as a person. He must navigate through love, loss, and vengeance. Now saddle up as we are about to begin. The journey begins. It's been 10 years since the great massacre of the gunslingers in the Battle of Jericho Hill. Roland Deschain, the last remaining gunslinger, now walks a lonesome path of vengeance and to make all wrong things right. His quest is to reach the mysterious Dark Tower and set his out-of-sync world right, but before that, he must find the Man in Black. Chapter 1. Encounter with a Stranger. Under the scorching sun, ravens nibble out the eye and skin of a man with a crow's head. Leaving the skeleton of the crow-headed man to rot, a man walks in the desert. His cloak billows in the air. He gathers some grass and wood to make a pyre. The narrator calls the man a fox as he speaks in a raspy voice. Nice and dry with a steady breeze should burn well, says Martin Broadcloak, the Man in Black. The narrator realizes it's devil grass which burns so brightly. One must not look into the fire as the devils live there and they lure in whoever looks into the flame. Martin gleefully notes how the fire burns brighter in Gilead, but not longer. As Martin leaves a message for his pursuer, he beckons Roland to come and laughs maniacally. Maybe Roland has heard the call, or maybe not, as he walks the desert with a mule that has dead eyes. Roland had been chasing the Man in Black for 18 hours a day and still hadn't got any ground on the bastard. As he enters a ravaged village, a skeletal man comes out from his hut, and the gunslinger reaches out to his gun in reflex. However, the old and decrepit fellow poses no harm. The old man has recognized Roland as a gunslinger and welcomes him. He thought the gunslingers had perished from Earth, but recognized the shooting iron. Roland says he is searching for the Dark Tower, but the old man says no one who has looked for the Black Dog has returned. Black Dog? Not sure why he says that, but the old man wants a favor. He gives Roland a compass and asks him to give it to Jesus, so that Jesus can return and take the half-blind old man to heaven. Roland agrees to the old man's last request. The ravings of a man whose kin has been murdered barely affect Roland. The old man says the wheel of Ka turns, and the day of the white comes. But Roland calls it a colorless world, and the wheels tend to run over people anyway. And so Roland walks away with the compass and the nearly dead mule, leaving the old man to his ranting. The man will probably forget about giving up the compass the next day. There's barely any trail left by the Man in Black except the burned devil grass, leaving Roland a pattern to follow. As the grass crumbles between his fingers, Roland doesn't care what the message was. He must gain on the Man in Black. Roland realizes that the Man in Black is heading southeast and pulling him along. He remembers feeling dizzy, which reminded him of the lost horn of Eld and his friends. Roland makes a fire and sleeps. After walking for a week, Roland and the nearly dead mule find a hut. It's a wonder how the mule kept walking. It's as if it was obligated. They stumble upon a young man tending a small piece of cornfield and greet him. Roland asks for food, but the man only has corn and beans. The man is called Brown, and his pet crow is called Zoltan, which can talk. Brown recognizes Roland as a gunslinger, and Roland learns that the Man in Black was here around 6 weeks ago and stayed for supper. However, the sorcerer didn't say much, and it rained. Brown goes to make dinner, and Roland climbs a hand-dug well to fill water. As Zoltan approaches, the ever-so-wary Roland wonders if he wants to kill him. However, the bird curses him and leaves. Later, by the fire, Brown serves Roland food after the lad had taken a good nap. Brown informs Roland that the mule has died and Zoltan has eaten its eye. Roland is neither surprised nor heartbroken as he eats his dinner and talks about the afterlife with Brown. Roland takes his chances and asks if they can eat the bird, making Zoltan curse again. Brown replies that talking animals are difficult to eat. Roland wonders if Brown is an enchantment, but Brown assures him that he is just a man who is willing to listen. Brown asks Roland if the mule was his last companion, and Roland is reminded of his old friend, the young boy named Shimi, who had a mule. However, Shimi is dead, and so are the rest of Roland's friends and family. If you are wondering what happened after the Battle of Jericho Hill and how Roland survived, you will find out now as Roland begins telling his story to the stranger. As Roland's quartet falls at the Battle of Jericho Hill, John Farson's forces round up the dead and heap them in a pile. Farson ordered his men not to mutilate the gunslingers, but he was not present when his men started dancing and carousing around the pyres of the fallen. They toss the bodies of Cuthbert and Roland. They don't want the stink of the affiliation's dead bodies to mingle with their own. However, before they light up the pile with Roland's body, Farson's men are summoned by their boss. As they leave, Roland pulls himself out from the bodies of his friends. He knocks out a man who was about to take a piss on the bodies. Roland takes a last look at his friends and promises to avenge them. As he shuts their gaping eyes, a hand suddenly grabs his. It's Eileen, and she still seems to be breathing. Chapter 2. Goodbye, Gilead. It's the most horrifying vision for Roland as he watches Eileen scramble herself out from between the corpses of Cuthbert and Jamie. She coughs up blood and Roland pulls her out of the pile. However, Roland is in complete denial, believing it's a sign they will triumph. Roland carries Eileen to the bushes and still believes they can win, but Eileen brings him back to reality. She begs Roland to take her home, to Gilead, so that she can lie with her fathers in her family crypt. However, Roland refuses to see the truth as he dreams of reaching the Dark Tower together. Eileen tugs at his clothes to make him realize that she is dying, and all she wants is for Roland to honor her last request. Roland gives in and leaves with Eileen in his arms. The next day, they come across another atrocity of Farson. A group of merchants lay dead with their throats cut and carts overturned. As Roland drags the blood-soaked Eileen on a stretcher, he witnesses the last moments of a young boy. The boy's pet, Billy Bumbler, refuses to leave his side and cries, "On, on." Roland stops to speak with the creature. The boy's name was probably John, as the creature calls Roland Olan. When Roland asks the Billy Bumbler who killed John, the creature replies that it's the Nod Men. Roland cannot understand the Billy Bumbler's words, but Eileen understands what the creature is saying. She deduces that 3 or more Nod Men were responsible for the massacre. One of them lies dead close by as some kind of entrapment adorns their shirts. Eileen points out that Roland needed to listen, which was never his strongest suit anyway. Roland buries the dead in a shallow grave with rocks piled atop them, and then he raids their carriages to find something of value or for survival. Roland bids the Billy Bumble goodbye, hoping to meet him again in life or death. At night, Roland stops in a forest and lights a fire and cooks dinner, while Eileen drifts in and out of consciousness. However, one of the poisonous darts suddenly strikes Eileen and Roland aimlessly shoots, calling the cowards out. However, something invisible screams and the dart gun falls. As someone invisible punches Roland, he understands what the Billy Bumbler meant by not men. The not men takes Roland's bag of supplies, but the Billy Bumbler appears out of nowhere and lurches into the air. Its bite damages the entrapment, and Roland shoots the men who now become visible. The Billy Bumbler helps. Before their bodies hit the ground, Roland rushes to Eileen's side and tries to suck out the poison, but it's too late. He tries to restart her heart for a long time, until it's long enough. With Eileen's lifeless body in his arms, Roland laments not being able to return the feeling she had for him. Although he claims to have loved her in his own way, he wishes he could have loved her truly. If only he were capable of love. She definitely deserved more for staying beside him all this time. At least someone who could shed a tear for her. It's after 2 days that Roland arrives at the ghost town of Gilead with Eileen's body and the Billy Bumbler for company. As Roland enters the crypt, he warns the creature of the fate that all his previous companions have faced. Roland lays Eileen's wrapped-up corpse into the arms of Court's skeleton, who was like a father to her. Roland then looks into the armory and picks up whatever ammunition or weapon he can find. The once coveted armory now lies almost barren, as Roland scavenges for scraps. He decides to look into the kitchen, but it stinks, and he only finds a bottle of spirits. It's good enough to tend to wounds, but Roland is suddenly distracted by inhuman cries and things falling. As he looks inside, Roland witnesses a gruesome scene. A family of Billy Bumblers being attacked by the slow mutants. Roland acts on instinct and starts shooting down the slow mutants, and doesn't notice until one of them bites into his shoulder. A Billy Bumbler cub bites the slow mutant's eye and saves Roland's life, but the slow mutant is faster and rips off the cub's head. Roland shoots the slow mutant dead and witnesses with wonder as the Billy Bumblers screams into the oversensitive large ears of the slow mutants, killing them in the process. The Billy Bumblers appear to be one of the most intelligent creatures, but unfortunately all of them perish, except the one accompanying Roland. He checks if his new friend has any wounds and apologizes for not being able to save the pack. As the lone Billy Bumbler wails, Roland caresses him. However, he is startled by a sound and takes out his guns only to find it's the old cook's ghost. The ghost claims to have died a long time ago and holds Roland responsible. What happened all those years ago? How did he die? And why the question of Roland joining him in death remains open to debate. Chapter 3. A Childhood Memory. The ghost of Cook Hax, holding a butcher's knife, looms before Roland. Hax was one of the rare adults who were known for treating all children fairly. At least that's what everyone thought. However, the now adult Roland seems to think the ghost is trying to make him feel guilty. Roland calls Hax a traitor and blames traitors like him for the fall of the House of Eld. He bears only contempt for the old cook and wishes to see him die again, at least if it meant he could save people like his mentor Court or his best friend Cuthbert. Speaking of Cuthbert, a flashback shows a young Roland practicing shooting arrows at a wooden cutout of John Farson, while Cuthbert distracts him by making faces. The boys are all still kids, and their ever so strict mentor, Court, chastises Roland for getting distracted. He reminds Roland that Farson's army won't be as nice and cooperative as to allow distractions. Roland takes a better shot with his crossbow and apologizes for blaming Cuthbert, who hasn't ceased from teasing Roland. Court finally punches Cuthbert to stop his silly act, and then punishes the boys by ordering them to spend dinner and breakfast practicing. As Court leaves, Roland thanks him for the instructive day. Later, as Roland suggests, the boys venture into the west kitchen to get supper, while Cuthbert is still angry at Court for punishing him. He has a swelling on the spot where Court had hit him. As they approach the kitchen, a woman asks the heirs to the kingdom if they are having another bad day. In case you don't remember, Roland is the son of Stephen Deschain, the Din of Gilead, and a direct descendant of Arthur Eld, the great warrior king. Cuthbert's dad was also one of Stephen's closest friends. Clearly, the boys are regular visitors to the kitchen, and Hax can't help but feed the boys. He asks a woman called Maggie to serve the boys pie and asks them to leave. "Don't get me in trouble," he says, words that will haunt Roland and Cuthbert later. The boys take the food and hide under the stairs to finish their meal, and that's when they hear something they shouldn't have. Roland and Cuthbert overhear a conversation between Hax and a soldier. It appears Hax is Farson's follower, and the soldier asks Hax to store poisoned meat in the cold room. The meat is supposed to be fed to children so that they can die in peace. Maybe it's one of the twisted ways Farson wanted to finish off the affiliation. He had obviously brainwashed Hax and the soldier alike to believe that the children will be liberated this way. Hax doesn't like the idea, but he is not meant to question Farson's way. The soldier asks Hax for mutton before he leaves, but the boys remain in shock. Cuthbert can't believe it's the same Hax who had once put poultice on his wounded leg, while Roland is infuriated as he fantasizes about slitting both the traitors' necks with his knife. When Roland's father, Stephen Deschain, returns home from the upland, he tells his advisors and friends about the rise of Farson's barbarism and how far Farson has extended his arm. Roland suddenly appears with news that Farson's hands have reached Gilead. Martin, the evil sorcerer, was then one of Stephen's advisors and remarked about Roland's lack of decorum. Roland apologizes for suddenly bursting into adult conversation, but his news is urgent. As Stephen allows him to speak, Roland spills out everything he has learned, filled with great hatred. Stephen recalls how the tracks were blown upland at the railhead and there is dead stock in Hendrickson, which only shows how Farson's men have infiltrated every land. Martin, the great manipulator, makes Stephen question everyone, even his son's motives for revealing the information. He calls Roland an insignificant boy and warns that Farson's agents should be wary of him. Perhaps the last part was a warning to himself. However, Stephen has to make sure Roland understands the repercussions of what he said and that the boy is not lying. As Stephen threatens his son, Roland cries out that he is not lying and wants to kill the traitors. He claims that the betrayal had changed something inside him, making him want to kill. Stephen justifies Roland's feelings, believing they will make Roland formidable. Roland demands that his father see the traitors hanged, and Stephen thinks it's foolish, but agrees. Sometime later, we see Roland and Cuthbert riding together. Cuthbert asks Roland if he knows who the good man is, and Roland calls good man John Farson a pretender, who pretends to hate the affiliation for their wealth and power, but seems to covet the same things. The good man speaks of democracy and equality, but all that is a farce, and he is just a common bandit who mutilates people. Cuthbert wonders if their fathers would have caught Farson. It would have prevented people like Hax from being traitors, and saved him from being hanged. However, Roland claims that people need to see someone being punished, and when there is none, people make one a criminal just to see them hang. It tells a great deal about the society the boys live in, which in some ways is not so different from ours. As the boys approach the gallows, they find a flock of crows sitting on it. The boys have reached much too early, and as they approach the gibbet, the birds take flight. The boys get a reality check as they climb the wooden stairs. The place is not a clean ground of high morals, as the wood is pine, splattered with bird droppings, and it stinks. Cuthbert says that he won't be able to watch the gruesome affair, but Roland insists that he must. Cuthbert hates being a child and wishes he could have been more mature. He calls Roland mature and more grown up. He claims that Roland will find his childhood when he is an old man. Cuthbert might be right, as Roland tells his friend to overcome the fear of death, as only then can he become a gunslinger. Roland sticks his head into the noose and asks Cuthbert to develop confidence with their skill and training, so that they are able to pull their head out. Roland nudges Cuthbert to try it, but some kind of sorcery makes a bird step on the lever, and Bert holds onto the noose as the trapdoor gives way. Roland holds Bert as he manages to get his head out. Bert lashes out at Roland and then curses the birds, calling them the harbingers of death. Cuthbert brings the lever back to its position and implores Roland to leave, while Roland picks up wood chippings from the banisters. He hands one to Bert, commemorating the day as the one they leave their childhood behind. While the two young boys move away from the gallows and sit down, the townsfolk begin to gather to witness the spectacle of a hanging. They have come in broken down wagons and with breakfasts as if it were some sort of entertainment. Hax is brought to the gallows, and even under a shroud, the cook seems to hold more honor than the one who has come to see him dying. As Officer Charles ties the noose to his neck, Hax claims he has nothing to confess, as he has not forgotten the face of his father. Charles accuses Hax of capital murder, sedition, and crossing the white before pulling the lever. There was no trial, and so Hax dies with the words, He never what? A question that will forever linger in our minds as Hax dies while trying to say something. The spectators dispersed soon enough, and 40 minutes later, Roland and Cuthbert approached the corpse. Just as Court instructed them, the boys started throwing breadcrumbs underneath Hax's legs. It's 5 years after this event that Gilead fell into the hands of the good man. Stephen died, and Roland killed his mother. Now, all these years later, Roland gives the ghost of Hax a chance to finish his sentence, but the ghost leaves with a one-word message: regret with an I. Chapter 4. The Threat of Not Men. In spite of the wrong spelling, the ghost's intent is clear enough, but as Roland points out, it's too damned late. As Roland and the Billy Bumbler make it out of the ruins of Gilead, he hopes that the ghosts of his parents are lurking here. His father might have become more generous, while the ghost of his own youth might be hiding somewhere. Roland remembers his first love, Susan Delgado. In a better world, he would have made her Queen of Gilead. Roland wonders if that knowledge has made Susan's spirits visit the ruins of Gilead. However, he is done lingering on the ghost of the past, as once again the gunslinger sets his sights upon the Dark Tower. Roland dreams of climbing to the top and demanding justice from whatever resides inside. Roland's loud musings are suddenly interrupted by another voice, but it's not the companion Billy Bumbler. Martin Broadcloak appears amidst the ruins of Gilead, and Roland aims at him with guns. He laughs and sends Roland's bullets in different directions. It was a dumb move. More so as without the man in black, Roland will be unable to reach the Dark Tower. Roland argues that the Dark Tower is his destiny, and he will reach it using any means necessary. You know that of a certainty? Martin asks. Yes, says Roland. Well, as it so happened, you are correct, says Martin, as he vanishes with a blinding shot of light. After a few weeks, Roland and his Billy Bumbler companion arrive at the heavily fortified city of Kingstown. The town itself is a paradox. Its surroundings and even its interior are barren, while a carnival is currently underway. As soon as he enters, Roland is confronted by a pie seller, who asks for money for information on the priest in a black cassock. The pie seller doesn't really understand the reference, as the last priest was killed by Farson. He points Roland towards Widow Black's Traveler's Rest. Roland thanks the man and asks if the carnival is for a holiday, but to his surprise, it turns out to be a gathering for the hanging of a Knot Man. Roland doesn't understand why it's a celebration and remembers his own history with the Knot Men, when he suddenly spots Susan in the crowd. But how could that be? Wasn't Susan tied to a tree and burned down? Roland can't believe his eyes either and calls out to Susan, but the crowd shoves him away. Roland arrives near the gallows, where an official announces that a Knot Man will be hanged for theft, rape, and murder most foul. The Knot Man is taken to the stage by guards. No one has realized how the Knot Man has made itself invisible, so the black shroud tied in chains is taken to the gallows. The crowd is definitely riled up, and so are the guards. The deed is done quickly, and the crowd cheers as the limp body floats in the air. Roland doesn't extract any mirth, and at this point, death makes him feel sick. However, this is the point. Someone breathes at his back, making the hair on his neck stand. It's another Knot Man, who promises to avenge his brother. Roland grabs hold of the Invisible Man, but the Knot Man slips out of Roland's grasp. And although Roland tries to chase him, it's not easy to keep up with someone you cannot see. Later, Roland finds himself taking residence at the Traveler's Rest and thinking about the looming threat of the Knot Men. The Billy Bumbler is still accompanying him and drinks water from a bowl, while Roland looks at an old hut. When the waitress arrives, Roland is startled to see it's the woman resembling Susan. He calls her Susan and then asks who she is. The woman asks Roland if he is a mind reader since her name is Susan. Now that is uncanny enough. Susan, the waitress, claims to be the daughter of Widow Black. Susan recognizes Roland as the brave one who almost caught a Knot Man. She talks about some of her friends being kidnapped by the monsters. Roland asks Susan what she knows about them, and she replies that they might be demons from Naar, were creatures or old people with magical power. Susan also explains that the rundown building Roland was looking at was a Dogan, a place where the old people lived. Roland believes John Farson's men came to town to look for weapons in the Dogan. Roland asks Susan if there really were weapons, and Susan gives a sarcastic reply, saying Farson didn't really inform her about what he found inside. However, Susan claims that the Knot Men appeared as soon as Farson's troops left the town. That's definitely a wild coincidence, and we are sure there's more to it. Roland promises to make Farson suffer, and as he continues speaking with Susan, footprints of an invisible person appear in the eatery's window. At night, the footprints appear outside Roland's window. They make their way to Susan and her mother's room. Was it being close with Roland that brought the Knot Man to Susan? Or is it the fact that being close to Roland always means danger? The invisible Knot Man enters Susan's room and puts a chemical-filled cloth over her mouth to make her unconscious. Susan manages to shove it aside and scream, waking her mother. Susan tries to fight the Knot Man and even tears off a piece of his clothing, but she faints anyway, and the Knot Man carries her away, leaving Widow Black screaming in horror. Chapter 5. Escape from the Knot Men. Widow Black's terrifying scream brings Roland and his Billy Bumbler rushing into the room. Although Widow Black is not a very warm and kind individual, she doesn't deserve to have her only daughter stolen. For once, the woman doesn't complain when Roland picks up the torn cloth and Billy smells it. Roland promises to get back Widow Black's daughter. "I won't lose her again, I swear," says Roland as he and Billy jump off the window. Widow Black wonders what Roland meant by again, but Roland has already left and is well on the way to the Dogan. Roland had plans to visit the Dogan in his own time and raid it for weapons, but not under such circumstances. As they enter the stinky Dogan, Roland is surprised that Billy can smell the Knot Man, even with so much filth around. Roland follows Court's training and takes caution as he infiltrates the Dogan. Roland and Billy maintain grave silence as they sneak in to find the invisible enemy. To his astonishment, Roland finds Susan deeply unconscious, lying on a bed while another young girl sits by her. The girl asks Roland to either shoot her or let her take care of Susan, but when they hear footsteps coming, Roland refuses to take any chances. He locks up the girl in a cupboard and waits as a group of men arrives. These are clearly the Knot Men. They are visible now as the switches in their jackets seem to be off. It is clear from their conversation that these men are using girls to power their equipment which makes them invisible. However, they also seem to believe that the girls are deliberately sabotaging their equipment. One of the men blames another called Bean for not training Jessica. Jessica is the one who got pulled away by Roland. She has not put the cuffs and shackles on Susan. The men worry that if the shackles and cuffs don't work, they would be unable to keep the girls in line. The bald-headed man, who seems to be the leader of the group, takes it upon himself to put on the cuffs. He points out that with so many weapons there, it would be unwise to leave the girls unprocessed. As soon as the cuffs are on, Susan wakes up and starts fighting back, but switches on a button on his armband. This seems to electrocute Susan as she gets enveloped in an electric blue charge. This is enough to make Roland come out of hiding, and instead of a witty heroic entrance, Roland charges at the men with guns blazing. It could have been a piece of cake for Roland, but as Jessica starts screaming, she too gets electrocuted, and Roland is distracted. Roland still manages to take down the group of men, except one, who escapes by turning himself invisible and then rings the alarm. Roland also finds the controller and switches it off. He orders Jessica to get the cuffs and collars off herself and Susan. The trio then grabs some weapons, ready to fight. They hear more Knot Men approaching, and Roland sends the two girls to free the others, while he and Billy stay back to take down the Knot knotmen. Invisibility has made the knotmen sloppy and overconfident, which really works out well for Roland, as he takes them down. Susan also goes all out, blasting off a few invisible ones and freeing her friends. Susan orders Jessica to show the girls out as she goes looking for Roland. Jessica rallies the girls into picking up weapons as they no longer want to be prisoners. Meanwhile, Roland follows a knotman who was dumb enough to run through a pool of blood, leaving footprints behind. Roland almost catches up to him, but he suddenly hears Billy and the scream of a girl. "Don't let it be Susan," he prays to God or anyone who is willing to listen. Sure enough, it's Susan, as Roland and Billy witness her being dragged away by an escaping knotman. Billy bites the man on the foot, and before Roland can take a fatal shot, the Billy Bumbler makes a leap at the man's throat. It proves deadly for the Billy Bumbler as the knotman picks up the animal and throws it against a thorny tree. As Billy gets impaled by a tree spike, Susan calls the knotman a monster. Jessica arrives in time and shoots the knotman in his head in retaliation. However, this is the end for the Billy Bumbler. Although Roland cuts down the branch and helps the creature, he feels extremely guilty for not being fast enough. Susan is surprised as Billy understands and answers Roland. As the Billy Bumbler takes his last breath, Roland assures him that his friends in the afterlife will take good care of Billy, especially Eileen. After the creature dies, Susan hugs Roland and realizes that he is not crying. Roland doesn't have any more tears left for a friend or a companion. He spends the night making love to Susan, and normally Widow Black wouldn't have allowed a man like Roland near her daughter, but she allows it this time. However, Roland is not ready to begin life anew with Susan, the waitress, and he leaves her a note before abandoning her in the middle of the night. With this, Roland finishes telling his story to Brown. He feels sorry that Eileen and Billy Bumbler died. Roland has nothing left to mourn and believes that anyone close to him dies. But telling his story to Brown has somehow made him feel better. Brown asks Roland what he will do now, and as the dawn comes, Roland leaves on his quest to find the man in black and make him reveal the location of the Dark Tower. The Little Sisters of Illyria, Chapter 1, A Dead Town. It's the season of full Earth, and even the air seems to have started to boil up. In this heat, Roland Deschain and his horse find themselves up the winding road of the Destroya Mountains. It's been a year since the Battle of Jericho Hill, a battle in which the good, the white, had lost, and Roland has been the only survivor. Once again, the horse has fallen sick, and Roland lies to it that they will soon find a doctor. Maybe luck is on their side as they soon notice a town ahead of them. Roland doesn't know what town it is, but the narrator tells us that it's Illyria, the formidable town with danger lurking everywhere. Roland too has his suspicions, especially since the town appears to be quiet, even from far. As Roland nears the town, he is astonished to find there's no sign of business, people, or horses, except for the chirping of crickets or any other insect. Roland proceeds to enter it as he needs medical aid for the 2-year-old horse. As Roland crosses over, a church comes into view, and he deduces that the townspeople probably worship the Jesus Man. Roland doesn't care for God and notices the flowers on the gates and the wreaths have all dried up. As Roland enters, he hears a low, distant sound of small bells, but can't trace its source. As Topsy the horse starts coughing, Roland gets down from it to give it some respite. He notices flies accumulating near the horse's eyes and shoos them away to give the horse a more decent goodbye. Roland suddenly notices another wood thumping sound and starts looking through the town. He looks at porches and other places where the old and youth are supposed to convene and chat about politics and crops, but all that lies is an empty pipe. Roland finds the saloon emptier as he enters, while the doors bear an old bloodstain. He moves past a stable with nothing inside and then finally comes across a church, the source of the tinkling sound. Somehow Roland feels being watched, and he is not wrong, but as he draws his guns, feeling completely alone, let us just say that he is absolutely wrong. Green-skinned slow mutants hide in the alleys and keep a watch as Roland takes in the town. He finally locates the sheriff's office and goes in to get answers. However, he is met with a blast of hot air escaping from the office. There's a single cell inside, again with the same dried blood everywhere. Roland finds a locked door and opens it with trepidation as he fears the sheriff's body would be there. However, there are just more guns. Roland now finds a book called Registry of Middeeds and Redress in the Ears of Our Lord, Illyria. As Roland flicks through it, he finds the last entry is from February. He also discovers what's making the thumping sound, a boot banging against a wooden trough. The dead man's boot is half submerged in the trough while a dog sniffs it. Roland notices that the dog is injured with blood on its mouth and a cross drawn in its chest fur. The horse coughs up blood, scaring the dog, while an empty shot from Roland's gun sends the dog scurrying away. Roland doesn't have a heart to kill the only living being in the town, and when he checks the dead body, he realizes it's a young boy about to grow into a man. Roland notices a golden medallion on the boy's neck bearing the name James and a cross. Roland picks it up, hoping to deliver it to a kin of the boy. He also decides to give the boy a proper burial, but his horse suddenly lets out a groan and falls dead to the ground. You might think that Roland now has to work for 2 burials, but there's a lot more on his plate now. The sound of the horse makes Roland turn around, and you can call it an image straight out of a zombie movie. As Roland watches a town full of green, slow mutants approaching him, the nearby radium mines are causing their skin problems, but Roland wonders why the sun is not killing them. The gunslinger takes out his guns and asks the creatures to stop. While one collapses under the sun, 3 others continue to approach Roland steadfastly. The slow mutants wield legs of chairs and tables as weapons. Roland kills a fat slow mutant, making the others stop. However, just as he starts backing away, another one of the double-headed vicious creatures approaches Roland from behind and hits him on his shoulder. Roland manages to spin around and blow up the slow mutant's head, but it triggers the rest of the slow mutants to launch an attack. At this point, there's nothing slow about the mutants, as they steadfastly gain on the lone human. Although Roland shoots down a few of the slow mutants, he is quickly overcome. Roland stumbles upon a cart, and the creatures of the night knock the gun out of his hands. However, as the narrator points out, there is something wrong with these slow mutants. They don't prefer the night, they are more intelligent, and some are even dressed alright. The narrator jests with the reader at this point, asking whether they thought Roland would easily escape the clutches of the green monsters. Before we move on, let's talk a bit about the cover art, which features tendril-like hands clawing the gunslinger. Nothing from the art ensures Roland's survival, except for the fact that this one is going to be a horror fest. So, buckle up. Roland does not escape the clutches of the green monsters, and a slow mutant wearing a fancy hat and pants tries to take Roland to his slow mutant horse. The rest of the slow mutants cheer as the debonair slow mutant starts dragging away Roland. Fortunately or not, Roland is knocked out, and his fate might have him join the rest of the townsfolk as food for the slow mutants, or be one of them. However, nothing of that sort happens, as a voice from behind asks the slow mutant to stop in its tracks. "Cease! We said cease!" makes the slow mutant pull the reins on his mutant, gruesome horse. The slow mutant argues that punishing the prisoner is well within their rights. As he fumbles, the demonic group of nuns claims that the slow mutants have no rights. Sometime later, Roland experiences a nightmare in which he is flayed across the cross he saw upon entering the town. His skin is ripped off, and all the muscles and flesh in his body are exposed to the mist surrounding him. Roland hears some kind of singing. He wonders if it's of crickets, and then red-hot flames engulf him, and Roland screams in horror. The flames soon turn to crickets, and they engulf him, entering his mouth. The pain becomes unbearable for Roland, and he begs for it to stop. Soon, Roland wakes up and finds himself in some sort of hospital. His face is now swollen with scars. Am I dying? Roland wonders as he lies immobile in a cradle of white cloth. He wonders where, when a smooth, cool hand caresses his forehead and a warm voice asks him not to stir. Chapter 2. I Got All My Sisters With Me. A soft voice speaks to Roland. The nurse calls Roland a pretty man and asks him to keep quiet so that he can be healed by God. Roland is delirious and speaks about the creaking sounds, horse tethers, and hanging ropes. The nurse asks Roland to stop talking about something as dark as hanging. The issue cover also features the beautiful Sister Jenna, but darkness and monsters loom in the back. It appears Roland is kept hanging in a sling in a hospital dorm with silken curtains around. The beautiful nurse suddenly comes into view. She wears a string of bells on her wimple. Roland tells her about the pressure under his buttocks, as he comes to realize that he is not really lying on a bed, but hanging on top of it. Roland remembers a burning sensation, but the nursing sister assures him that he will be fine. The nurse checks on Roland and pulls out the medallion Roland had taken from the curse. The sigil burns the nurse, which proves she is just as damned as the demonic nurses who rescued Roland from the slow mutant. As the nurse cries out in pain, so does Roland. He speaks to her about the Dark Tower, whose sigil, the rose, is worn by the sister. As the nurse scurries away, Roland lapses into unconsciousness. Just as the nurse said, time heals Roland, and he is not as sore as before, and the bruises have started to fade. However, the only constants in his life now are the faint tinkling of the bells, the sound of the insects, and the beautiful nursing sister looking at Roland in awe. As the nursing sister Jenna lurks by Roland's bed, the other sisters approaches her. They tease her for falling in love with the patient and wanting to kiss him. However, by kissing the vampire nuns refers to sucking the blood out of Roland. The ugly sigil pendant is the only thing stopping the sisters from draining Roland of his blood. Jenna stands guard to stop the others from harming Roland, which angers Big Sister, Sister Mary. They ask her if the darker bells on her wimple have made her forget her place. Jenna claims that it's only because Roland needs to heal further to be a sweet dinner. Whether she is lying or not, time will tell, but it makes Sister Mary back up. Mary reveals her true demonic face as she backs away. The sisters remind Jenna how her mother paid the price of her rebellion by staying alone and dying hungry. As they approach another patient, the sisters warn Jenna to call upon the same fate. Sister Jenna closes her eyes as the rest of the nuns turn to another 20-something lad. They are no longer hiding their ghastly faces as they bite the boy and drink his blood. White beauty, that's the first word that escapes Roland's mouth when he wakes up. It is perhaps a compliment to his surroundings, but when Roland looks to his side, he is shocked. There lies the same boy he found in the water trough. Roland decides that his eyes are playing tricks, but the boy wears the same medallion that Roland took from him. When he checks his own medallion, Roland is surprised to find he still has it. Roland realizes it's another boy, perhaps a family member. He decides to ask Jenna about it. On his other side, Roland finds an old man hanging in a web. The man has a broken leg and something moves inside his leg, which horrifies Roland. The gunslinger remembers his mentor's lesson about being ready for anything, but again slips back into unconsciousness. When Roland wakes up, he finds the vampire nuns beside his bed. Their faces still human, but shimmer like the silk walls of the ward. As Roland inquires, the nuns finally introduce themselves as the Little Sisters of Illyria. Sister Mary's face starts to change as she asks Roland to throw the medallion into the chamber pot. She lies about the medallion, blaming it for poisoning him and preventing his healing, but Roland knows better. He asks them to back away, but Mary introduces the others, Sister Louise, Michaela, Coquina, and Tamara, asking if they look frightening at all. Their charms seem to have worn off as Roland sees their true faces. Tamara reveals her age as 120 years, which is further proof that the sisters are demonic immortals. As the vampires approach him, Roland twists and turns, but it hurts him. He is saved when Jenna suddenly appears. This time, we see her real face, which is as haggard as the others. The sisters mock Jenna by calling her a baby, but Jenna defies Big Sister and asks them to tend to other patients. Jenna asks the sisters not to joke or tease Roland, which again infuriates Big Sister. However, she seems to back away after a while and leaves Roland in Jenna's care in memory of her mother. As they leave, Big Sister asks Jenna to meet her later at Thoughtful House. After the rest of the sisters leave, Roland asks Jenna if it was her hands that soothed him. He asks her about the place, and Jenna replies that it's a hospital where the sisters serve the doctors and the doctors serve them. Apparently, they were hospitalers before the world moved on. Roland hasn't seen any doctors so far, and so he asks where they are, to which Jenna makes a weird request. She asks Roland not to scream and wake up the other patients as she calls upon the doctors. Roland agrees and calls Jenna pretty, which seems to sadden her. Jenna claims that Roland shouldn't call someone pretty without seeing them properly. Roland flirts back and asks Jenna to remove her wimple, but she refuses and jingles the bells on it instead. It summons the doctors, who turn out to be an army of black bugs that appear from the shadows and start nibbling at the old man's injured legs. Roland stifles a scream as he watches till the doctor bugs return to the darkness. Jenna claims the bugs have special healing powers, but they cannot help the old man because his injuries are beyond their reach. Jenna tells Roland how the green muties took him after he angered them. However, the sisters were out at that time picking herbs, and they noticed the muties playing with Roland. He asks whether the green monsters always obey them, and Jenna replies that they do most of the time. As Jenna asks for Roland's name, he finally gives it to her, as well as his identity as the last gunslinger of Gilead. Roland asks Jenna about his weapons, but Jenna lies about not seeing them. Roland lets it pass as he realizes she is lying out of fear. Jenna is suddenly called, and before she leaves, she asks Roland to keep mum about the doctors. She also takes off her wimple and asks Roland the truth about her beauty. A mesmerized Roland compliments her curls, and Jenna asks Roland to lie about the medallion and say that it belongs to him. Jenna leaves and Roland falls back into sleep. He dreams about a bug disturbing him. It's the same doctor bug that Jenna had shown him. However, Roland finds himself slow and unable to swat the bug, which suddenly turns into a green slow mutant. Roland wakes up with a jolt, almost knocking over the bowl of something gruesome that one of the nurses was trying to feed him. Roland apologizes and the sister nurse feeds him the muck. Roland asks for Jenna, and the sister tells him that Jenna is being punished and flogged by Big Sister at the Thoughtful House. Roland gets furious and threatens to kill them for hurting Jenna. However, the vampire just laughs it off and asks him about the boy lying in the next bed. As Jenna and Roland decided, Roland calls the boy his brother, but the vampires are smart enough to know. Another sister arrives and asks Roland for his brother's name. This time, the boy in the other bed answers. He calls Roland Jimmy and reveals his name is John Norman. As the vampires leave, John asks Roland if his brother is dead. Roland tells him that he took the medallion only to return it to his people. John thanks Roland and the two discuss the evil little sisters of Illyria, except for Jenna, who is like a princess and kind. Chapter 3. Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down. Roland and John's conversation continues, but they try their best to keep it as private as possible. In a shady place like this, they fear the sisters will eavesdrop on them. So they continue their act, and John keeps calling Roland Jimmy as they talk. As Roland continues to eat the gruel, John asks him why is he eating the poison the sisters gave him. Well, the sisters won't poison Roland if they want to feed on him, and anything beats starving to death. John asks Roland to suit himself, and Roland asks John how he came to the place. John begins telling his story. He recalls being hired as a scout along with his brother James and 4 other young men to escort caravans with goods like seeds, food, tools, mail, and 4 ordered brides to a place called Tejuas. They were hired because they were strong and had good horses. James and John were riding with separate parties, as together they used to fight like siblings. However, Tejuas is 200 miles west of Illyria, and on their way, they were a little too close to the radium mines. You must know that animals sense danger before humans, and so did the horses. John's horse refused to take the road through the mountains, and John suggested taking a route around it. However, an old man named Abraham chides them, but ironically, his horse acts the same way, and Abraham falls off his steed. The caravans had to halt as John and others helped the old man get onto his feet. The brides grew impatient and James came forward inquiring what had happened. When his horse reacted the same way, John told his brother how all the horses were spooked. Abraham refused to believe that anything was wrong and kept making cranky comments. James volunteered to take the lead to get the caravans moving, and John supported him, ignoring the old man's snide remarks. As they moved, they remained blissfully unaware of green slow mutants that were hiding in the mountain shades and waiting for the right moment. A girl called Lizzie helped with Abraham and warned the boys about the men in the mines who turned into monsters. She reminded them that they must heed the horses' senses. However, they ignored the warnings and continued the treacherous path, only to fall into the traps of the slow mutants. The mutants let the caravans pass and waited until the rear of the group came into view before ambushing them. They threw rocks at the older, more experienced riders at the back, so the younger ones were in the lead. The avalanche buried one of the men, and Johnny refused to leave without giving him a proper burial. Jimmy pointed out that he was already buried, but John felt it was a crude joke. As John recalls it now, it was one of the biggest blunders that he made. Jimmy promised to wait with the rest of the caravans as Abraham and John extracted Ray's body for the proper burial. Abraham tried to talk sense to John, but he ignored it. At present, John wishes he had listened to the old man and his brother. Things might have turned out differently. As Jimmy and the others waited in Illyria, they were attacked by the muties. These green slow mutants were definitely guided by someone else. Jimmy informed that 2 men were killed and the women were taken away. Jimmy, Johnny, and Abraham fought the slow mutants, but Jimmy was knocked in the head. He fell into the trough and drowned, while unconscious, whereas Abraham had his every bone broken. John Norman points out that Abraham would have been able to kill all the mutants if he had his youthful strength. John considers himself the luckiest, as he only got knocked up by a slow mutant, and before he passed out, he saw the vampire sisters of Illyria appear before him. John remembers waking up in the hospital with several other patients in each bed. Most of them had the doctor bugs treating them. John claims that not all of them were from their group, so there were probably more people ambushed in a similar way. It's clear the slow mutants have some sort of deal with the vampire nuns. The number of patients declined, and John recalls the day the sisters came for him. John pretended to sleep as the sisters approached him, but the medallions scared them off and they went on to drain another, while Jenna held back and watched. Roland hopes Jenna will save them, but John reminds him that Jenna is also a vampire and will turn like the rest in time. As they speak, Roland suddenly starts feeling weak and fuzzy. John says that it's the soup that not only makes one sleep, but also makes one unable to move. Before Roland drifts back into sleep, John asks him to bring the medallion to his family if he survives. Roland claims that they will both survive, but John knows it's a foolish dream. Later, John falls back into a natural sleep, and Roland consents when Jenna appears with a bunch of herbs. She keeps them hidden under his pillow and promises, "I am going to help you, Roland." How does she learn his real name? Roland wakes up with her name. He can barely move his arms as he finds a note tied to the herbs. It's a note from Jenna with many spelling errors. She asks him to nibble on the heads of the flowers every hour to gain his strength, but warns that too much of it could cause cramps or death. She also tells him in an incomplete sentence that they will escape tomorrow night, not before. At last, she asks him to be careful. Chapter 4. The dark bells are ringing. Roland is sure that Sister Jenna will get him out of the morbid hospital. He doesn't consider mere facts like she might fail and nibbles on the dry flower. Its bitter taste shocks him and suddenly his stomach cramps and his heart races. He believes Jenna has poisoned him and it doesn't take much for Roland's beliefs about the girl to shake. However, as the sisters quietly approach him, Roland calms down and pretends to be asleep. 5 little sisters, Mary, Louise, Tamara, Coquina, and Michaela, laugh as they approach their next victim, Abraham, the old man, who is kept hanging in the web of the next bed. Roland hears Sister Mary chant something in an odd language and then he hears the vampire sucking on the old man's blood, who makes a single sound before he dies. After the sisters are fed, they move to Roland's bed and he can smell their foul breath. Roland feigns sleep as the vampires plan on finding a way to remove his medallion so that they can feed on him. For the time being, the sisters decide to drink Roland's manly fluids. They caress him to make him ejaculate and then share the fluid. As they get occupied, Roland promises himself not to fall asleep. Meanwhile, Jenna overhears Sister Mary ordering Sister Tamara to bring in the glow slow mutant Ralph so he can remove the medallion. The next morning, Roland wakes up to find his energy and mobility back. He realizes that Jenna was true to her words and rejoices, but quickly hides his excitement and the flowers as Sister Coquina approaches him with the immobility suit. Coquina asks Roland to raise his hand, but he pretends he cannot move. The sister sees through his lies and threatens to whip Jenna to make him take the food. Roland begrudgingly takes it and hides Jenna's note. He feels the numbness returning and drifts back to sleep. When he wakes up, Roland finds the hospital empty except for John. He takes out the dried flowers to nibble on them, and it reminds him of a yeasty aroma from the great house kitchen that he and Cuthbert frequented. The dried flowers still taste bitter and still make his muscles cramp, but Roland contains them as he notices the sisters bring in the ogre Ralph. It's the same slow mutant who had tied Roland to his mutant steed. They approach John Norman's bed and Sister Mary instructs the slow mutant to take off the medallion from both men. However, Ralph has his own demands. He asks for whiskey and smoke, to which Sister Mary agrees, but first he must get the medallions off. As Norman sleeps, Ralph grabs his medallion while the sisters get elated. Ralph suddenly drops the medallion as he seems to have changed his mind. He again asks for whiskey and baccy, making the sisters impatient. Sister Mary gets furious and asks him to stop teasing them, but Ralph enjoys tormenting the sisters. He teases them as they can't drink his blood. It will make the sisters drop dead and glow in the dark. As Ralph laughs, Sister Mary seethes in anger. She brings out a pistol and threatens to shoot Ralph. Ralph asks whether the sisters forced a mutie named Smasher to give up the guns in exchange for the same things. Sister Mary doesn't answer and insists that Ralph take out the medallion from John's neck. Ralph obliges but digs his nails into John's neck and tears it open. As blood gushes out of the boy, the sisters rush to drink it up, while Ralph escapes. He gives up the tobacco and whiskey for his life, while Roland helplessly watches the sisters drain John dry. Soon, John is gone, and Roland finds himself alone in the ward. Sister Coquina returns with the gruel and questions Roland for lying about being a brother to Norman. Roland retorts, asking why Coquina feeds him the poisonous porridge. Coquina berates Roland for blaming their administrations and instead blames the medallion for his sickness. She even claims that John had got rid of it. Roland refuses to believe it and asks for Sister Jenna, as he would only believe her. Sister Coquina gets angry and bares her fangs as she creeps closer to Roland. Unfortunately, she notices the twigs of the dried plants that Jenna had brought for Roland. As she questions Roland about where he got it from, Jenna arrives. She now wears the clothes of a gunslinger except for the wimple and points guns at Coquina. Sister Coquina threatens to tell Big Sister, but Roland grabs her from behind. He uses the medallion to scald the vampire, and Jenna rings the dark bells of her wimple to call upon the doctor bugs. Coquina rings her own silver bells to make the bugs go away, but the sound is lighter than the dark bells, and the insects cover Coquina. Chapter 5. Don't you want somebody to love? Sister Kokina cannot believe that Sister Jenna has turned on them, but the bugs finish her off before she finishes her sentence. Jenna helps Roland out of the slings and notes that they should move fast, as all the screaming from Kokina must have roused the others. Jenna hands Roland his guns, and Roland picks up the medicinal herbs before they clamber out of the ward. Jenna warns Roland not to look back, but looking ahead, Roland now realizes that the silk walls and ceilings he saw were only frayed canvas. The hospital beds weren't four-poster beds but shiny iron cots. Now that the illusion is gone, Roland finally sees the reality of the place he was living in. Behind him, Sister Kokina is still covered by the bugs and tries to hold herself. As Roland and Jenna exit the hospital, Roland realizes it was not a hospital but an ordinary medical tent. Roland suddenly stops walking as he remembers that he has left John's medallion behind. However, Jenna takes it out of her pocket and Roland assumes she is not one of those vampire healers. Jenna proves him wrong as the medallion seems to sting her flesh, and she quickly hands it to Roland. Roland takes it, but Jenna wonders if she has again disappointed Roland. The gunslinger kisses the girl's fingers and her lips under the moonlight, but bliss and romance always elude Roland, and the sisters find the couple. The gunslinger instantly takes out his shooters, but the sisters are not afraid as they continue to mock the couple. They call Jenna a slut and ask if she is crying because she has forsaken her celibate vows. Jenna claims that it was the sweet kiss that made her cry. It appears the girl has never known love and kindness in her damned life. The sisters continue to slight Jenna, but she doesn't care and declares that she is leaving with Roland. The sisters try to stop them from leaving, but Jenna tells them she has set the bugs on Sister Kokina. Sister Tamra, Michaela, and Louisa are horrified and curse Jenna for being damned. Roland asks what they mean by being damned, but Jenna ignores the comment and worries about Sister Mary, who is yet to confront them. As they try to leave the town, Roland keeps asking what the sisters meant, but Jenna refuses to say. She confesses to joining the vampire nuns in feeding off humans, but she is not ready to do it anymore. The story Dark Bells, which continued in each issue, tells how Jenna's mom was the rightful big sister, Alejandra, and how Sister Mary cursed the others to become vampires. Jenna seems to share her mother's morals, who refuse to feed on human blood. Jenna tells Roland that if she is damned, she wants it to be of her own choosing and not forced by the other sisters. She claims that her mother made a mistake by bringing her back to the sisters. Jenna assures Roland that she will accompany him on his road as long as she can. Roland is happy to have her along, but Sister Mary appears before them from nowhere. Now she is a complete monster. Jenna warns Mary to stay back or she will summon the Can-Tem and set them on her. However, Sister Mary is not scared. As she hovers above them, Mary claims that the bugs won't stray so far from the darkness of the tent. She also asks the gunslinger to put his guns away, as unless the pistol or the bullet is dipped in something holy and wet, it won't harm her. Roland puts away the guns but jumps on the monster. He tries to choke Mary, but his attempt is futile, and Sister Mary throws him to the ground. Sister Mary lurches after Jenna as she decides to kill her and get back the bells that she once stole from Jenna's mother. However, Jenna is not afraid, as she steadily rocks her head from side to side, calling on the doctor bugs. Sister Mary is enraged and bares her fangs to kill Jenna, but she stops short when she hears a growl from above. The dog that Roland once spared appears. The dog has a natural cross drawn by his fur, and the holiness of it wipes off the smile of Sister Mary's face. Sister Mary lets out a deafening shriek as the dog pounces on the vampire, tearing off her head from her body. Roland gets up and drags Jenna away. They make a run for it, but the dog doesn't pay them any attention. Jenna asks Roland what just happened, as the vampires are supposed to have some power over animals. Roland explains that this was the only dog left in the town because it knew the vampires would have no power over him. He explains that since the dog bears the symbol of Jesus, it was protected from harm. Jenna asks why the dog came for help, and Roland answers with one word: Ka. They get 5 miles away from it as they sit down for a rest. Roland thinks the soup's effect is still slowing him down and asks for the seeds, but Jenna warns that it might make his heart burst. She assures Roland that the rest of the vamps would not follow them and instead pack up their traveling hospital and move on. As they sit on the grass, Jenna explains how the sisters have survived for a long time by always moving from one place to another. It was Sister Mary's pride and overconfidence that became the reason for her death. Jenna also apologizes to Roland for not packing up his bag and bedroll, but the gunslinger of Gilead doesn't care as long as he has his father's guns. As they lie down next to each other, Roland asks Jenna if she will be alright, but she is not sure what will happen to her. It was her mother who brought her back to the sisters, but her mother is no more, and Jenna has already fed on blood, so she has few options. They talk about about Ka, and Roland plays with Jenna's curl. He asks her to take off her wimple, and then Roland marvels at her beautiful face. Jenna asks for a kiss on the mouth, and the gunslinger obliges. However, as Jenna continues to kiss his face, Roland falls asleep and doesn't hear the soft confession of love from Jenna. Roland dreams of the cross dog as it leads him to the Dark Tower. He hears the bells in his dream, but their tone is as bright as silver. The Dark Tower flashes like light and screams, waking Roland, and he realizes it was Jenna. Roland quickly gets to his feet and takes out his gun, as all those years of training as a gunslinger have taught him. For a moment he thinks the Harridans have followed them, but instead he finds Jenna's clothes and wimple lying on the grass. Roland still hears the bells, but turns out it's not the bells but the Dr. Bugs. It is revealed that Jenna has dissolved into the Camtan, the Dr. Bug. Roland now realizes what the other sisters meant when they called Jenna damned. Roland recalls how Jenna's skin felt like different things, revealing she was the bugs all along, and now, betraying her own kind, she disintegrates into the million bugs. Roland picks up Jenna's wimple and rings the dark bells to gather the bugs inside it. As the sun comes up, Roland leaves. He claims to have learned a lesson about damnation. On his way, he continues to hear the bells ring and stops several times, but no one appears, and Roland is alone again in his journey towards the Dark Tower. The Battle of Tal, Chapter 1. Everything has a price. Southeast of the Destoya Mountains is Pricetown. It's a place where people come to barter anything and everything, including souls. The last gunslinger of Gilead, Roland Deschain, arrives in the town looking for something more useful, something that would enable him to find the devilish sorcerer and the way to the Dark Tower. Roland moves like a ghost without contact amidst the crowd, but someone still notices him. Roland tries to ignore the pimp that tries to talk to him. As the man tries to grab Roland, the gunslinger almost twists his hand. The pimp offers Roland pox-ridden, dried-up girls as virgins, although that status might be up for debate. Anyway, Roland is not interested in whores. He wants a horse. The pimp tells Roland that most horses in this part of the mountains are mostly muties, and he is not wrong. When Roland goes to buy a horse, he finds that most have 2 heads, 6 legs, or 3 eyes. He asks for a mount that is threaded, as mutated horses are no use to him. The stable owner retorts that unless Roland has money, he can piss off. The gunslinger throws down a few gold coins, which makes the owner turn and show Roland the only fine mule he has got. However, the stable owner asks for a hefty 12 pieces of gold and promises to give him a saddle for free. Roland Deschain takes the offer. The grow bag he inherited from his father, Stephen, as it grows coins and, on occasion, gems. At last, Roland asks the one final question that he seems to ask anybody at this point. Have you seen a man in black come through these parts? And sometimes he is lucky as he gets an honest answer. However, even information costs gold, and Roland seems to have plenty of it. Roland gives it, but not before strangling the man for his utter greed. The man claims that the man in black came a couple weeks ago. He was riding an old rig with a tarp. The man confesses that the man in black was headed southeast towards the desert. Roland leaves the man with gold, but the man curses Roland from behind. Not that Roland cared. Now, as the narrator points out, the man could have been lying. I personally like how the narration always breaks the fourth wall, making it feel more personal. It is the rare elements that hold the stories. Anyway, as the gunslinger continues to ride through the deserted land, he comes across completely barren and baked lands, where even the rains are begrudged. So it comes as a shock when Roland finds a small town out of nowhere in the harsh, barren lands, possibly holding some horror like that of Illyria. As Roland enters the town, the gentle wind rings the church bell ever so slightly, which reminds Roland of little sister Jenna. He passes the town graveyard with the crosses leaning down due to the overgrown devil grass. 500 feet away, Roland finds the name of the town, Tal. He hears a chorus of Hey Jude as he enters the town, along with the thumping of a piano. There are only a few people in the dusty town, and most look at Roland with indignation, especially at his holsters. Roland arrives at Kennerly's livestock stable to put up his horse for a night or two. Old Kennerly asks for payment immediately, and the gunslinger tosses a gold one at his feet. Although gold makes a more solid sound than copper or silver, Kennerly still checks it by biting. He claims he has no change and Roland doesn't need it. A girl with a little kid was hanging out in the stable. She asks Kennerly to shoot up money. It's probably a bet, but Kennerly ignores it and agrees to Roland's demand to take good care of the mule. As he comes out, Roland notices 3 boys pretending to play play games, even though he knows they had been listening. However, the kids refuse to answer his question, let alone speak to him. Roland inquires about cafes, and a little boy answers, pointing him towards Sheb's, where Roland can at least get a burger. Roland thanks the boy for speaking to him, but it does the boy no good as the other kids beat him up and bully him, calling him a weed eater. Roland doesn't interfere, for he knows that withstanding these little cruelties will prepare the boy for greater heartbreaks of adulthood. Gunslinger Roland enters the saloon called Sheb's, from where he could hear the tinkling of the piano. Everyone except the weed eater, who has collapsed on a table, looks at Roland as he enters. Sheb, the piano player, also doesn't turn around. The narrator informs that he is not so bright, and that's why the saloon now belongs to the girl with a scar, who now works behind the bar. Roland makes way through the people, who seem to be normally hanging out with the saloon. But as Court would say, expect nothing, anticipate everything. So Roland and our narrator are a bit wary. As the owner, Allie, introduces herself and Roland asks for meat. Allie claims to have clean, threaded beef, but Roland internally scoffs, sure the meat will be from Mutings. However, Roland is sure hungry and doesn't care where the meat comes from, and so he orders 3 burgers and a beer. Roland makes heads turn with his wholesome order and the gold coin, which he shows to Allie. As usual, he doesn't expect any change. In a dusty town, having gold is inviting trouble, so as soon as Allie has gone to cook the meat, the people in the saloon prepare to mug Roland. The gunslinger pretends to notice nothing, but when a bald man with a knife approaches him from the back, Roland raises his pistol and quietly asks him to sit down. The man retreats and everyone returns to their business. When Allie brings the food, Roland asks for bread, but Allie lies, and Roland lets it go. He devours the food, and while he is drinking, he senses the people quiet down. He notices the weed eater rise up and approaches him. It is the same man who had collapsed on one of the corner tables. However, the man is a walking corpse as he reeks of devil grass. The dead man uses the high speech as he recognizes Roland as the gunslinger of Gilead. He asks Roland for gold, and Roland gives it to him. The reanimated dead man scares away Allie's patrons, and she calls after them, but no one listens. Allie complains to Roland about driving out her patrons, and Roland asks her about the dead man walking. Allie mentions that the man's name is Nort, and that he has never used the high speech all his life. Roland seems to understand that there's more to it, and he asks Allie the price for information on the man in black. To his surprise, Allie asks for sexual favor, and Roland takes a good look at the lean woman, who seems to have been beautiful before life was cruel to her. Allie feels embarrassed and calls Roland mean for judging her, but Roland assures her and asks her to close up. The reanimated dead man still lies on the table, and Roland wonders if he would steal anything, but Allie assures him that Nort would not. After she puts out the lights, Roland and Allie climb upstairs and get to making love. While the unlikely couple gets lost in the moment, Sheb quietly climbs the stairs with a dagger. He opens the door, interrupting the couple as he shouts, "She's mine." Chapter 2. Raising the Dead. Roland's sexual escapades have rarely been calm and peaceful, so it's no surprise his relationship with Allie will be wrecked by a jilted lover. Sheb claims Allie to be his first and brandishes a dagger, but Roland twists Sheb's hand, knocking it out while Sheb cries out in pain. Allie clutches for the covers while Sheb falls down as his broken wrist dangles like a marionette. Sheb claims that it was for Allie and that she is his first. Allie empathetically approaches the man and helps in resetting Sheb's wrist. Allie curses Sheb for being stupid enough to take up a fight, as he is not strong enough, and an injury like this can very well stop him from playing the piano, which seems to be the way Sheb is making a living now. While Allie treats Sheb, Roland suddenly seems to recognize the man from a long time back. Roland grows cold and menacing as he recalls Sheb from his days at Hambury, watching Susan die. Sheb is defiant and doesn't recognize the gunslinger, but Roland fixes him with an icy gaze as he says, "But you remember the girl, don't you? The girl named Susan? And Reap Night? Were you there for the bonfire?" Recollection and realization make David tremble, as he understands that he is in more danger than when he entered with a knife. Sheb is surprised to see how Roland has grown into a man, recalling the boys he and his friends were. Roland goes mad as he grips Sheb's arms and demands that he leave. "Get out of here before I tie you to a tree, set you on fire, and sing songs while throwing corn shucks at you." Roland screams at the man. Allie holds Roland, stopping him from killing Sheb, but Roland continues to scream as he threatens the man to get out. Allie feels bad for Sheb's hand and worries how he will manage, unaware of his crimes as a spectator and maybe a perpetrator in Susan's murder, the one true love of Roland. Allie asks Roland what the outburst was about, but Roland is unable to tell her that, in his youth, he was trapped and watched through a magical sphere as the love of his life was tied to a tree and burned alive. He couldn't tell Allie that Susan's last words, "Roland, I love thee," are seared into his mind like the flames on her skin. Roland definitely can't tell Allie that his soul died with Susan, and now the only way he can make love to a woman is by imagining Susan. So all that Roland says to Allie is, never mind. Allie confesses that Sheb couldn't do much and that she took advantage of him because of her own survival. Roland insists on knowing more about Nort and the Man in Black. In fact, that was the deal he made with the woman, and that's what brought all this trouble. Allie claims that Nort was a local who died and was touched by God. We are taken into a flashback as Allie tells Roland about Nort, the manure collector. Nort used to haul crap all day in his honey wagon, the manure cart, and that was possibly the reason why he started drinking. Soon, Nort succumbed to alcoholism and sold his rig to the greedy, uncouth Kennerly, who tricked Nort and bought the rig for much less than its worth. Nort used up all the money in buying and consuming liquor, but when he was out of money, he went on to smoking devil grass. Nort was intentionally staying numb, possibly to hide from the cruelty of life. However, smoking was not enough, and Nort started chewing on the devil grass, which started making him crazier. The town's kids would hit, mock, and send their dogs after Nort. As Nort stopped eating and started living on the grass, his condition worsened, and he died right in front of the saloon. Allie remembers the day clearly as Nort came to hear Sheb play the piano. He claimed the coach was coming, but there was no coach. Nort had dragged out Allie from the saloon and pointed at the horizon as he noted something out there was all black. With this, Nort had puked his guts out, and everyone realized that Nort was talking about the Reaper and Death's coach. Allie finishes telling the story of Nort's death, but Roland grows impatient. All he wants to know is about the Man in Black and urges Allie to tell him about it. So Allie continues with her morbid tale of Nort's death. The Man in Black appeared in the later afternoon on the day Nort had died. The sorcerer's arrival brought heavy wind and dust like a premonition. Apparently, old Kennerly and his eldest daughter saw Martin from the window and assumed Man in Black to be Death's harbinger. There was a grin in the Man in Black's face, probably for what he had in mind for the town. It appears Kennerly has sexual relations with his eldest daughter. The girl asks what they will do if the rider knocks on their door, and Kennerly says he won't answer it, or will make the girl answer. However, the Man in Black headed straight for Sheb's and took his saddlebag as he went inside. The town was holding Nort's wake inside the saloon, and no one except Allie noticed when the Man in Black entered. He spoke softly and ordered whiskey. Allie had struck up a conversation with the Man in Black, who dressed like a priest but bore no religious symbol. Allie told him that the mourners were all bums and how the people were always making fun of Nort. As they talked, the Man in Black demanded more whiskey and paid with a silver dime. Like Roland, he didn't demand any change. The Man in Black then lied to Allie, telling her she was deaf. He inquired if she was close to Nort and spoke in riddles. His words soon turned vicious and vilifying as he declares, "Mr. Norton, he dead. Dead as anybody. Dead as you or anybody." Allie asks the evil sorcerer to get out of her place, but the maniac tells her to wait and starts laughing hysterically, drawing the others' attention. As everyone halted, including Sheb, the Man in Black proclaims that he will show a wonder. The Man in Black ridiculed a fat woman named Aunt Mill, who ran out crying, while the sky cracked and the wind howled as the necromancer began using dark magic. He began with spitting on Norton's forehead, and soon Sheb joined the disgusting ritual, shooting up phlegm on the poor dead man's face. Naturally, the Man in Black showed his approval, but some might have found the whole thing horrid and fled, while others gathered to watch. "Nothing is forever, not even death," the Man in Black exclaims, as he starts gliding across the corpse of Nort, leaping from one side to another in an uncanny ritual. One of the mesmerized audience started clapping in awe and asked the Man in Black to jump again, as if he was showing off a magic trick. After he has done it thrice, Nort starts twitching, and the Man in Black lets out another villainous laughter. Everyone left the saloon in fear, and the Man in Black jumped a fourth time as Nort woke up. The odor was unbearable, and Allie recalls feeling numb with panic and fear, while the Man in Black continued to laugh, finding joy in his sordid affairs. Chapter 3. The Dead Tell No Lies. When Allie stops talking, Roland points it out, but Allie gets contemptuous and retorts that although Nort's wake has made her realize that she is ignorant of many things, she knows when she is not talking. She soon realizes the outburst was uncalled for and apologizes, but Roland is patient and understanding. Allie has now wrapped herself in a stole as she tells about her difficult life, but she continues to speak about Nort's wake. Everybody else fled, but panic had rooted her feet to the spot, and the Man in Black took advantage of it. He encourages Allie to ask Nort about the afterlife and what lies beyond death. Unfortunately, nobody is there to witness the evil man's psychological torture of Allie, as he terrorizes her with notions of oblivion after death, while worms feed on her flesh. The Man in Black yearned for sadistic pleasure as he wanted to see Allie's tortured face when she learned the truth of death. Allie claims that the man's sadistic laughter broke her paralysis, and she ran upstairs to her room, where she wept and shivered. Allie had to endure a war in her mind as the man in black's words echoed in her mind. It had driven her mad, as Allie kept thinking what Nort had seen while dead and what terrible secret he might share. She confesses to Roland that part of her wanted to ask. Meanwhile, the man in black handed Nort a note and asked him to deliver it to Allie as a favor for bringing him back to life. Allie had watched the man in black leave with a grin, while Nort aimlessly wandered in the storm to pull out weeds to feed on. After the storm passed, the people returned to survey the damage and gathered all the wood. However, they were still apprehensive about entering the bar, and Allie forced herself to climb down the stairs. Nort was still there, and he greeted her. He claimed to have been touched by God, because that's what the man in black pretended to be to the lowly people of Tull. In fact, Nort was happy that he wouldn't die again, and as Allie turned on the lights and cleaned the bar, he shared that he wanted to stop chewing the grass. This time, Allie took a good look at him and found herself no longer afraid of the abomination. Nort was partially stoned and yet ashamed. He was so addicted to grass that if he stopped, he shook and complained that the man in black could have taken away his addiction. It seems the poor man thought that he was alive and well again, failing to understand that what he was given was not a gift at all. Allie seems to have realized that the man in black was no god, but a demon. As they spoke, Kennerly entered the bar to check if the rumors of a dead man coming back were true or not. Kennerly groped and tried to harass Allie, but she told him to get his paws off and go back to his daughter. Kennerly stopped and asked for a beer instead, and Nort gave Allie the note from the man in black. Nort thanks Allie for always being good to him, but he is scared that if he had forgotten to give the note to Allie, the man would have returned and killed him. Paper is a valuable item in this part of the Midworld, and so Allie was surprised to find one with her name written on it. The letter felt heavy, and sure it was, as the man in black revealed the word 19 in the letter, which Allie must speak in front of Nort to make him divulge the secrets of what lies beyond death. The man has signed the letter with his other alias, Walter O.D.M. In the letter, Walter mentions the word 19 4 times to ensure that Allie is eventually forced to utter it in front of Nort. He also made it clear that the knowledge will make her mad, which is almost diabolical. Allie recalls how the rest of the townies had lit up the debris and the corn from the storm, and it seemed to her that it was her preview of the pit fire of hell, where she will be serving drinks again. Allie succumbed to the curse of 19 as she wrote the number on the board, wondering what secret it would unleash. As Allie finishes the story, Roland is surprised that that's all the man in black did. The gunslinger believes Walter has left some kind of trap for him there, just as he did for Sally. Roland advises Allie to put the word out of her head and teach herself to forget the number ever existed. That's easier said than done. Roland comes close to Allie and tells her that Walter O'Deam is a liar, but he knows that Allie will eventually give in. Allie has finally found kindness, and she asks Roland not to leave the next day. Roland gives a non-committal answer. For the rest of the night, he continues with lovemaking, which satisfies the scarred woman. The next morning, Allie cooks a comforting meal for Roland, and he eats it without a word, probably hoping Roland will stay back. However, Roland has other things in mind. For example, what lies in the southeast beyond the desert? He asks Allie if she has a map and if she knows what's on the other side. Allie doesn't know, as no one crosses the desert, but dreadfully realizes that the gunslinger is soon going to leave for his mission. Allie informs that it's Sabbath in Tull, the day everyone in town will be praying with the preacher woman, Sylvia Pittston. Roland asks why Allie is not attending, to which Allie explains that Sylvia's brain is cooked with notions, and her preaching poisons the mind, so Allie doesn't want to be a part of it. As Roland gets up, dread washes over Allie as she knows it's time to say goodbye. However, Roland is only going to visit the stable for now. He guesses that Kennerly is not much of a churchgoer and probably knows what lies across the desert. Allie warns Roland that Kennerly often makes up stories and gives out false information, while Roland leaves with a "thank you, Allie." After he is out of the door, Allie breaks down, as this was probably the first time someone said thank you to her. Before he heads for the stable, curiosity, or the ragged hymn, draws the gunslinger to the rundown church, where Sylvia Pittston is presiding over the clueless townspeople. Pittston is actually a recluse who only comes out on Sunday to spit hellfire and work her magic on the people. While Roland Deschain stands far in the corner, Sylvia Pittston introduces the topic of their meditation, the interloper. Sylvia Pittston claims to know the players from the Holy Bible. An array of images shows what Sylvia tells the people. She brings up examples from the Bible and says she was part of them or witnessed witnessed them, and that she loved these characters except one. She mentions someone who stands in the shadows, and yes, it sounds like she is referring to Roland, but Sylvia remains ambiguous. She calls that person the interloper and claims to be afraid of the interloper. Sylvia makes the interloper a villain who poisoned Eve and an outright villain, instilling fear in the townspeople about the so-called interloper. Sylvia gets agitated and ecstatic as she riles up the common people and tells them that the interloper is immortal and the one who tricked Jesus and God. She calls the interloper the Antichrist and the Crimson King, who will lead men to hell. With each sentence, Sylvia sows fear in the people's minds about the interloper. She tricks them into believing that whatever bad happens and whatever sin they perform is done by the interloper. It gets pretty clear that Sylvia Pittston is the trap that the man in black left for Roland, more so when she directly points at him as she addresses the interloper. Chapter 4. The Interloper. The gunslinger's reflexes work overtime, and Roland's hand strays toward his gun as he waits for the congregation to attack him. However, Sylvia changes track and asks the people in the church to renounce the interloper. As she continues with the agenda, Roland leaves. He has an inkling of what awaits him in Tull. Roland aimlessly wanders for a while, and notices that the clouds never change their direction in Tull, and some kind of magnetic pull drags them towards the southeast. Roland deduces that Tull lies on one such magnetic line running southeast, which leads him to realize that one of the legendary ancient great roads to the front door of the Dark Tower passes through the town. It gets clear that Walter O'Diem is on a mission to get to the Dark Tower, and Roland shudders to think what will happen if he reaches it first. Roland then visits Kennerly's stable, where his eldest daughter makes seductive gestures to him, but Roland is not interested. Kennerly has several daughters and has buried 2 wives. Since he screws the daughters, we can't blame them for being desperate, but when Kennerly catches the girl making eyes towards Roland, he slaps her. Kennerly claims that the girl is possessed by the devil and has gone wild. He cites the holy book, saying children who don't obey their parents bring a plague. It's not like Kennerly is winning the Father of the Year award, but as he refers to the preacher woman, it gets clear that there is barely anybody in town who doesn't believe in Sylvia. Kennerly compliments Roland's mule, which is the only normal one he has seen in a while. Speaking of wild, Roland inquires about what lies across the desert, but Kennerly barely has any idea. He claims it's huge and infested with devilgrass, weed, and demon. He also confirms that's the way the man in black took after curing Nort. Kennerly starts to speak about Sylvia, but Roland stops him, and Kennerly warns Roland that some people like listening to the woman. Kennerly confirms the coach road runs through the desert and recalls his father saying there were mountains or oceans with monsters beyond the desert. Kennerly is not of much help, and so Roland leaves, asking him to take good care of the mule. Kennerly makes vulgar gestures as he snidely asks Roland about his time with Allie, but Roland looks at him threateningly and pretends not to hear the question. Kennerly doesn't dare to repeat it and returns to abusing his daughter, while Roland leaves. As evening settles in, Roland returns to the bar, and Allie moves around, lighting lamps and cooking corn fritters. A sense of foreboding lingers as Roland and Allie seem to feel that tomorrow is going to be their last day in the town. Allie has given herself all night to making love with Roland, and the next morning, she is tired. Before he leaves, Roland asks Allie for Sylvia Pittston's house, and Allie says that she won't come out or meet. Much to Allie's chagrin, Roland keeps asking her about Sylvia Pittston, and she is forced to answer. Allie says Sylvia came to the town from the Dwellers around 2 years ago, and Roland guesses she came from the southeast and from a place farther away from the Dwellers or the desert. When Roland asks Allie for Sylvia's address, Allie asks if he will return to make love to her. Roland must have some feelings, or at least for Allie, as he says he would have made love anyway. Allie tells him the address. It's where the real minister used to stay before Sylvia arrived. Roland kisses Allie goodbye, and it seems to be their last. When Roland Deschain reaches Sylvia Pittston's hut, the weather is like the calm before the storm, which seems to reflect the fate of the town. Roland knocks on the door, but no one answers, and Roland bursts through. He finds the voluptuous woman sitting in a rocking chair as if waiting for him to arrive. The two stare at each other for a timeless moment, and then the woman speaks. "You will never catch him." Roland asks if she is talking about the man in black, and the woman confirms. Sylvia claims that Walter slept with her and spoke in high speech. Well, these are enough to screw with one's mind, and as Roland realizes, the man in black has screwed the woman in every sense. The man in black Black seems to have brainwashed Sylvia into thinking that he is an angel of God and the Gunslinger is the evil Antichrist. Sylvia fears that Roland will force himself on her and threatens him. Sylvia reveals that she is pregnant, but the man in black has led her to believe she conceived a great king's child through divine intervention. Roland declares the child a demon and inserts his gun inside the woman's vagina to forcefully abort the child. As he does so, Roland asks the woman the same question he has asked the others. What is beyond the desert? As Sylvia Pittston cries in anguish, she reveals that there are mountains beyond the desert, and it is where the man in black has stopped to meditate and gain his strength. After Roland is done, Sylvia orders him to get out, but promises him payback for killing the child of the Crimson King. If only she knew that the Crimson King is no god. With Sylvia shouting at him to leave, Roland gets out of the shack and returns to Kennerly's to get his mule. Kennerly smiles wickedly as he says that the wind can kill a man on a mule, but it's Kennerly's daughter who tries to whack the gunslinger with a wooden board. She calls him the interloper and renounces him, which shows that words travel fast in the small town. The girl fails to defend herself as Roland defends himself, and she pricks herself on the thumb. Roland demands his mule with more authority, and Kennerly cowers in. Roland takes the mule and walks through the town. It's evening and the lights are up as Roland returns to Allie to keep his promise. However, he finds the bar empty, and so he stuffs his bag and leaves a few gold coins for the barkeeper. As he walks into the trap, Roland thinks about why the man in black chose this place and what greater purpose his miracles and brainwashing serve. Was it just for fun? There's no one in Tull who can answer Roland, and to his bewilderment, no human is in sight. But Roland is aware that everybody is hiding and waiting for the right moment to attack. He addresses the townspeople in general, begging them to stay back and let him leave peacefully. And that's when he hears them say, "Leave to spread your evil, you mean?" The gunslinger turns around and finds the preacher woman leading the townspeople to attack Roland, the interloper. Chapter 5, Gunslinger vs. Tull. It's time for the final showdown, and it's something we have been waiting for since the beginning of the story. So, Sylvia Pittston, the self-appointed preacher of Tull, has pointed at Roland as the great Antichrist, the interloper. She wants revenge because Roland has killed her unborn child with the demonic man in black. The townspeople approach Roland like rabid animals, blinded by misplaced faith, and the only way Roland can get away is by being a gunslinger. As the men, women, and children pelt Roland with rocks, wood, and debris, he tries to shout a warning, but no one hears him. Sylvia rides a carriage with a cross as if she were on a holy crusade. Roland also fires some shots at their legs, but the people take no notice of the fire. They start throwing makeshift weapons like glass bottles and wooden boards with nails, which injure Roland's arm. Finally, he sees Allie as Sheb holds her like a shield to protect himself from the gunslinger's fire. His grin shows how Allie was a fool to feel sympathy for the man and tend to his wrist. However, that's not the point here, as Allie looks scared. She tells Roland that she has spoken the word 19 to Nort, and that she now knows what lies beyond death. As suspected, the knowledge has driven Allie mad, and she can't bear it. She asks Roland to kill her to give her respite. This is the only kindness Roland can show her at this point, and so, proving Sheb wrong, Roland shoots his lover in the bosom. Allie dies with a gratitude, and soon it's Sheb's turn, as Roland shoots him in the heart and sends him to the land of 19. Sheb dies with a surprised expression. The death of two people doesn't deter the townspeople who have arrived with shovels and pitchforks. They start throwing their weapons at Roland once again, in the name of Man Jesus and Sylvia. The woman of concern orders the people to bring down the accursed, but to Roland, she is the one who is accursed. He starts shooting people left and right, putting bullets through their skulls with extreme finesse. The gunslinger doesn't look at age or gender as he makes his way through the charged up, mad crowd. As the people drop, Roland carves himself an exit. As Roland makes his way towards the barbershop, the people follow him like in a parade, and Roland continues to shoot them dead. His training as a gunslinger pays off as Roland loads the bullets in the least time. Anyone else in his place would have shortly died at the hands of the mad crowd. Roland closes the door to the barbershop, and the short time again gives him time to reload, but the fanatics crash through the window without a care for hurting themselves or that they will die at the hands of the gunslinger. The people keep on coming, and Roland hears Sylvia still shouting, calling him a killer, and he realizes that he should have killed her when he had the chance. This might have saved the townspeople from the gunslinger's bullets. A little too late for that now, and moreover, things might have turned out exactly the same way anyway, just as Walter O'Dim wanted. As the people don't care for their own lives, Roland doesn't give a damn either. He rolls down a barrel to trip the people, giving him time to reload. Roland also throws a pan of boiling water with razors to slow down the killers. Roland kills Aunt Mill and a few others before he heads for the desert, but the people still have him surrounded. The Kennerlys also join the angry mob to kill Roland, but they should have known better. As Roland shoots, their blood spatters on the faces of the crowd, making them halt and shiver for a while. However, the Battle of Tull is far from over. The people start panicking, and to get them together, Sylvia calls out Roland as the devil and child killer. She poses with 2 crosses as if shunning Roland for his evil. But Roland has had enough, and he shoots down the crosses before hitting Sylvia in the head. Sylvia dies while cursing Roland, and Roland seems to think the battle is over. He is completely wrong, as Sylvia has done far greater damage than he anticipated. The people keep coming at him, and Roland resumes shooting them down. Roland tries to make them see that all of this is happening because of the man in black, but the people are too far gone. Someone stabs Roland in the arm, while others beat him or try to choke him down. Roland kills them all, and the last one tries to run, but Roland doesn't care. He puts the last man down. The man dies with a groan, and Roland Deschain finds himself bleeding from 20 different wounds, standing alone in the midst of corpses. Unlike Roland, the dead townspeople have only one fatal wound to show for. Roland has killed children and the old alike. The narrator reports the official count: 39 men, 14 women, and 5 children. Roland checks the shops to count and see if anyone is alive to fight him back. At last, Roland finds Nort tied up to the first floor of the saloon. As Roland cuts Nort loose, he falls, now again back to being a corpse. As the lights go out, Roland returns to Allie's place to eat a hamburger, drink beer, and sleep in her bed. He sees Allie for a moment in the cracked mirror. Is it a figment of his imagination, or did she appear for a last goodbye? The reflection is gone, and Roland bids her goodbye and hopes she can hear him when he wishes that 19 doesn't touch her. In case you didn't know, the number repeatedly appears throughout the Dark Tower series as a puzzle or a password. It seemed to be associated with danger. When the morning comes, Roland leaves on his mule for his quest to the Dark Tower. He has tied up all the wounds, but what he leaves behind are unburied corpses and a ghost town with ghosts who have found peace that Roland will never find. The Way Station. Chapter 1. The Endless Mohaine Desert. The life of Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger of Gilead, seems to be an endless loop, dotted with recurrent deja vu. Confusing? Yes, and that's what Roland felt when he woke up to find himself back in Brown's shack. Now, if you remember well, Roland was in Brown's shack in The Journey Begins, telling him how he survived the Battle of Jericho Hill and saved a bunch of girls from the Knotmen. Roland wakes up and wonders how he is back, but Brown tells him he never left. Roland remembers coming to this place before. The man still identifies himself as Brown and reintroduces his raven, Zoltan. Brown claims that Roland told him a story and fell asleep, while Roland remembers leaving the place. Roland thinks if it's some kind of sorcery, and Brown rightly guesses as he suggests that Roland is talking about the man in black. Brown throws some kernels into the fire and demons dance in it, while Roland contemplates killing Brown, just to be sure. However, Brown suggests that Roland dreamt of leaving and told him the story of Tull. He eggs Roland to continue his tale of the continuous persuasion of the man in black, only for Roland to confess that he eventually caught the man in black. He begins telling the tale now. Roland took the road through the Mohaine Desert, which leads towards the mountains. It's been 7 days since he single-handedly finished the population of an entire town. The gunslinger walks through the harsh desert. He only carries his guns and water bags, which are 90% empty. With no sight of the mountains, it's fair to assume that Roland is walking in circles. But then he notices a Joshua tree and knows he is on the right track. There is a body lying beneath the tree, and could it be of the man in black? Roland examines the body, but no. He is not in luck, as the skeleton of an unknown man lies there. Roland takes the dead man's water bag and continues his travel until he reaches the twin peaks of a mountain. The landscape resembles a woman's bosom or shark teeth, depending on which one you have encountered. As Roland continues, he finds a checkpoint that's closed forever. As Roland ventures inside, he finds skeletons poised for work. The stench of death is absent thanks to the desert sun, which has drained any odor. As Roland touches the skeletons, they crumble to dust. Roland checks the storage, but it's empty, probably looted by Farson's men or slow mutants. Roland also finds dried droppings of desert dogs, which might have been a warning sign, but Roland chooses to ignore them. He finds a dried up sink and decides to check on the shack behind the checkpoint. He finds a hand pump, and after a few struggles, clogged, dirty, and rusty water flows out. Roland fills a tumbler with fresh water, which flows immediately after. He washes his face and head with it and finally refills his water bags. After freshening up, Roland feels more alive, but that cannot be said about the 4 skeletons that are positioned as if they are sitting around a campfire. Roland recognizes it's the man in black's campfire and tries to decode the secret message that the man in black has left him. Before Roland can spend his brainpower interpreting the message, he is attacked by a hungry, wild desert dog. The gunslinger shoots at it, making it howl, and several others appear out of nowhere. Roland takes down the mutated desert dogs with each shot of his 2 guns, sending them to his friends in the afterlife. As he shoots, Roland utters the code of the gunslinger. I aim with my eyes, I shoot with my mind, I kill with my heart. The last remaining desert dog lurches at Roland and sinks its teeth into Roland's arm, but Roland blows its head off. The injury is severe, and Roland hopes against all odds that the dog was not diseased and has not transferred any horrible germs. Roland cleans the wound and bandages it while wishing to take down the man in black before he succumbs to any disease. For the last few days, Roland has shot and eaten stray dogs, but he dares not eat the meat of the mutated desert ones. Instead, Roland has hunted a bunny for dinner. As Roland cooks dinner in the middle of the desert, he notices another light far away in the mountains. It could be the man in black or someone else, but Roland cannot take the chances of shooting a person, especially since he is not in the right state of mind. Dehydration can do that sometimes, and so Roland decides to get some water before he does anything. 8 days later, Roland has depleted all his resources, and no food or water has presented themselves to the solo traveler. Roland sings to himself as his legs keep on moving involuntarily in an up and down motion. His mind transfers back to a rainy night at Gilead. Roland is now with his mother, Gabrielle, who tucks him in for the night. The boy Roland remembers that he has killed his mother, but Gabrielle tells him that only monsters kill their mother. Roland watches himself and his mother turn into a monster, which finally brings him back to reality, where he is faced by a dust devil. As the gunslinger brandishes his gun, the vampiric dust devil dissolves into dust, scared. The dust devils are half-alive, half-dead female vampiric phantoms that appear like dust tornadoes and drain away all the moisture from their victims. Clearly, they also experience hallucinogenic powers, or maybe the scorching heat of the desert made Roland hallucinate his mother. Whatever the case, Roland is very aware now and proclaims that he doesn't yet belong in the desert. The dust devil disagrees but leaves anyway. More days and nights pass as the gunslinger continues on his path, singing his song, forgetting the lyrics. This time, Roland Dischain hallucinates his old mentor, Court. Was it Court or was it someone else, as a crow sits on Roland's shoulder? Court, in his usual rude way, inspires Roland not to fall. He claims to always watch Roland with his good eye, as the other was damaged by a pet hawk, David. Roland still stumbles and falls. He notices blood on his palms and starts rambling about blood being served, being sacrificed, and made to run. It doesn't make sense, and clearly malnutrition and the sun have affected Roland's brain function. So it's quite natural that he will spot the man in black anywhere. Roland finally comes across a stable and a house, which has become sandier with the passage of time. Roland notices the man in black hiding behind the leaning houses. He breaks the fence and runs toward the man in black. Roland points his gun towards the man in black and asks him to raise his hands, but the man suddenly changes into a little boy with blonde hair and wielding a pitchfork. Roland tumbles and falls as Jake points his pitchfork, and the gunslinger tries to figure out what just happened. Chapter 2. The First Life of Jake Chambers. Was it really the man in black or just another one of Roland Deschain's hallucinations? Only time will tell, or not. But one thing we can be sure of is that a boy has found the gunslinger. Roland wakes on a bed of odorless hay, only to find his shirt and lips wet. The boy tells Roland that he tried to make Roland drink water, but it dribbled out. The kind boy gives Roland more water as he complains of a pounding head. As Roland points out, the boy could have killed Roland unconscious, but the little boy is not from a place where strangers kill strangers. Although killing Roland could be a safe bet, as anyone who got close to the gunslinger has faced untimely death, and so there's a chance the boy will share that same fate. The boy asks Roland if he would like to eat and introduces himself as John Chambers. However, Roland's sunstroke acts up and he throws up on the hay. Roland asks for more water, and as the boy leaves to get it, Roland checks his guns. He deduces that the boy must be between 10 and 12 years old, but also frightened. This makes John more believable. Despite being saved, Roland is still talking to himself. The boy hears him and asks about it, but Roland avoids the question, noting that John is not from Midworld. John offers Roland food and water while confessing to feeling confused about what to do with the unconscious Roland. The gunslinger says he thought John was someone else, and John asks whether Roland thought he was the priest. Roland realizes that John is talking about the man in black and asks John more about him. John reveals that the man in black camped out in the yard and stayed the night. His clothes resembled those of a priest, well, at least like what the priest wore in a movie that John saw with Zorro. John was scared of the man as he sat there in the dark without a fire and wickedly smiled at John. Poor John, as Roland suddenly gets aggressive as he asks John how long ago he saw the man in black. The boy fumbles, and perhaps Roland realizes his mistake as he changes his tone. John nervously guesses it's 2 weeks ago, which is when John, or as he likes to call himself, Jake, arrived in the way station of Midworld. However, Jake has a unique way of figuring out time, which has something to do with the time of poops he went. Jake asks why Roland seeks the priest, and Roland sarcastically comments, to administer last rites. A lot of stuff, Jake says, doesn't make sense to Roland. He asks what a movie is and who Zorro is, but Jake refuses to answer. However, Roland doesn't fail to notice how the mere mention of the words makes the boy tearful, so he insists on learning where Jake came from. Jake recalls very few, as being in Midworld has started to wipe out his previous memories, but he tries to remember it. Jake recalls having bad dreams and how Mrs. Shaw blamed his TV watching habit for it. Mrs. Shaw is the one who called Jake Bama. Roland doesn't understand the words and references Jake made, but hears him anyway. With Roland's encouragement, Jake starts describing the city where he lived. He describes the high-rise apartment, the Statue of Liberty, the cabs and buses, which makes it clear that he hails from New York City. Jake talks about walking to school through the footpath and observing the mannequins wearing clothes. Jake has difficulty remembering the exact terms and so tries to explain himself as simply as possible. He explains how the statues sold clothes and also describes his school attire, neither of which is relatable to Roland's chain of Gilead. As Jake struggles to remember, Roland suggests putting him to sleep and plays with a bullet shell to hypnotize the boy. In his sleep, Jake is back to the day he left Earth. He is John Chambers and it's May 31st, 1977. John is 11 years old and in 6th grade, but it is his first year at Piper School. To his friends, John is Jake, but to his dad, John is the kid he is banking on to make it big. John's dad is sending him to Piper, the best school in the country, but it was John's own merit that got him there. John's relationship with his father is rather obligatory, as he recalls only nodding to whatever his father said. Mr. Chambers promises John a trip to Disney World if he scores an A average. John's father works at a TV network, and John claims his father treats everyone, including his wife, as his subordinates. John is obviously a neglected child, as he is already getting A's, but his parents seem to be unaware of it. There's no one to help him prepare for school, as his mother seems to be sick. John obviously has issues, as he thinks he will have to go to the Nut House instead of Disney World. John seemed to have a better bond with the housekeeper, Greta Shaw. She prepares him lunches, which are always the same, but John carries them without complaint. However, as he leaves, Mrs. Shaw calls him Johnny instead of Bama, which surprises Jake. As Jake describes everything in his childish way, it gets apparent that Jake's mom sleeps around with Mr. Chambers' friends, while Mr. Chambers snorts cocaine. John, the son of a wealthy person, walks to school diligently. He is well-mannered, sensitive, and goes bowling once a week. As he walks alone through the footpath, Jake starts eating the Oreo cookies he got for lunch, not knowing that this would be his last normal meal. Now that he knows, Jake regrets not eating the rest of the cookies. Jake passes by mannequins and checks his teeth for stuck food. He remembers how the people around him on the footpath acted when he was killed. Jake describes the experience as being locked in a nightmare where events took their course. As Jake waited on the footpath ready to cross the road, the man in black appeared behind him. Jake didn't see the sinister man, but in his dream, Jake tells himself to run or just grab hold of something to survive. However, it has all happened before, and as you know, things tend to repeat themselves in the Dark Tower lore. So the man in black, or Walter O'Dim, or is it Martin? Anyway, he pushes Jake to the road. Jake falls and gets squashed by an oncoming car. The driver is shocked and so are the spectators, while Jake spits out blood and dies on the spot, only to wake up in Midworld. However, Jake remembers hearing the man in black's voice as he came to check up on Jake, perhaps to make sure the boy really died. As Jake talks in his sleep, Roland asks him if he wants to remember the event or forget about it. Jake chooses to forget it, and turns to his side to get a good sleep. As he sleeps, the gunslinger whispers to him a promise not to get Jake killed. Chapter 3. Demons of the Way Station. Roland doesn't dwell in the past, but when he dreams, it's another story. As Roland lies beside Jake, he dreams of the Battle of Jericho Hill and fighting side by side with his best friend, Cuthbert Allgood. Roland keeps muttering in his sleep, and in his dream, Cuthbert complains of being betrayed, so Roland mutters, "Betrayed, Cuthbert? By one of our own? But who?" Cuthbert gets injured, and suddenly he turns into Jake. As Roland sways between his nightmares and his reality, he realizes that he is the betrayer. His company proves fatal to anyone who follows him. Roland wakes up with a jolt, but the nightmare has done a number on him. He feels hot and finds Jake missing from his side. As Roland Deschain finally notices his surroundings, he notices that it's a large pumping station. The station bears the logo of NCP, but Roland wonders if it was made by the Great Old Ones to find water beneath the dry, black desert. Roland assumes the pump was made by the same people who made the weapons that were wielded by John Farson's army. If it's not clear to you, Midworld is a mixture of relics from different eras of the Earth we live on, so the guns and tanks that Farson's army used are the ones used on Earth during war. Roland switches on the pump, and after a half a minute, it starts spitting out water. The pump shuts off after draining 3 gallons of water, and as it does, Roland thinks of the time when the world had not moved on. He is now a man left with regrets and a long list of dead close ones. Roland begins by remembering Susan Delgado, who was burned down while being tied to a charyu tree. Then Elaine was accidentally shot by Roland and Cuthbert, and Bert was also killed in the water. Roland skips on Eileen and Jenna, as perhaps they are not the ones he has actually betrayed. Roland thinks back to Sheb, who used Allie as a shield, and Roland had to kill her before he got to Sheb. Roland remembers when Jake and Cuthbert became one in his dream, and comes to the conclusion that he is the betrayer responsible for the death of his friends. While that part is just a look into Roland's psyche, the moments in this chapter are oddly repetitive of past events, and don't add much value except for reminding us that Jake is doomed from the moment he gets close to Roland. The gunslinger comes out of the station and notices Jake sitting on the staircase of the other shack with a lamp. He was worried about the little boy and was relieved to find him all right. Jake tells Roland that he was afraid to light the lamp inside. Roland suggests that he and Jake have a palaver. For the uninitiated, palaver refers to tedious discussion. Roland begins by revealing his mission to Jake: to catch the man in black, make him tell the way to the Dark Tower, and then probably kill the guy. Roland asks Jake to accompany him, and Jake agrees, but he shows neither curiosity nor fear. Roland and Jake weigh in on their ration, and Roland decides to look into the cellar. Jake warns that it smells bad. In fact, it's the only thing that smells, as every other odor is cleaned off by the scorching sun. As the duo enters the kitchen, Jake confesses he's afraid the cellar ladder will give way and leave him stuck with whatever horrors inside. Jake feels grateful for not killing Roland in his sleep, as the gunslinger prepares to go down. Jake stays behind as Roland opens the trapdoor and descends down the ladder into the swampy cellar. The pungent smell of rotten vegetables attacks Roland's senses, and all Roland could find for a while were large mutated spiders. Jake suddenly says something terrifying as he asks Roland if he sees something that's not completely a man. He claims he got that vision when he touched the cellar door. Roland doesn't find anybody like that and gets some canned food. However, he is suddenly startled by a moaning voice. Roland takes the lamp to see and finds a line of sand running on the foundation, as if someone is digging from the other side. Jake gets terrified and pleads with Roland to come up, but Roland asks him to go outside and wait. Jake runs away while the groaning sound inside the cellar grows louder. Jake uses his commanding voice, the voice of Din of Gilead, as he asks the demon to speak. The demon speaks in Allie's voice to warn Roland, "Go slow past the drawers, gunslinger. Watch for the tahine. While you travel with the boy, the man in black travels with your soul in his pocket." Roland tries to make sense of the warning and suddenly notices a huge spider on his hand. The gunslinger flings it away and punches the wall from where the demon spoke. However, what he retrieves is the jawbone of the demon. Knowing that it probably has magic powers, Roland packs up the edible items and leaves the kitchen. He drops the lamp beside the trapdoor and keeps it open so that the spiders come out. Roland hopes the sun will kill the spiders. He calls out to Jake and the boy rushes to greet him, relieved that he made it out alive. In a tender moment, Jake Chambers hugs the gunslinger, and Roland tells him about the speaking demon. Later, Roland prepares their bed in the hay and secures all doors to make sure the spiders don't reach them. Jake repeats how he could have killed Roland with the pitchfork, the only person who ever made him feel safe. It's quite pathetic that the only person Jake feels safe with is the gunslinger, who is obsessed with the man in black and can kill an entire town. As they lie down, Jake asks why Roland wants to find the tower, and Roland says that he wants answers. He tells Jake that perhaps Jake can find it in his sleep. Roland again dreams of betraying Bert, but the next morning he is ready to continue with his journey. Roland and Jake fill up several water bags, and Roland gives 2 to Jake to carry. He asks if Jake can bear the weight, but the kid is only too eager to prove his mettle. As the day comes, the sun does its job as Roland anticipated, and they find the giant spider's body burning in the desert. The two now head for the mountains, bidding adieu to the leaning shack. Jake feels someone is watching them, and Roland ignores it, but as they think good riddance, the man in black watches with a grin etched on his face. Chapter 4: The Demonic Willow Jungle. It's been 3 days since Roland Deschain and Jake Chambers left the way station. As they inch closer to the mountain, the scenery becomes greener and livelier. Despite being a kid, Jake has not slowed the gunslinger down, and he asks too few questions, which suits Roland. He describes the landscape, the snowcaps, and the canyons to Jake, who has only seen the concrete canyons of New York. Jake finds the snowcaps beautiful, but Roland warns that the place is brutally cold and can kill a person. Roland gives a last chance to Jake to turn back, but the boy has tasted adventure, and he refers to Roland as Aragorn, but obviously Roland is not aware of Tolkien's works. Jake still lingers on the Lord of the Rings tales as he wonders if they will find cave trolls and or orcs up in the mountain, but Roland assures him that what they will find will be far worse. Jake suddenly slips and is about to fall, but Roland saves him. Roland realizes the boy is tired and needs rest, so he decides to camp out every afternoon for a 15-minute break. The gunslinger has obviously come to love the boy, as he doesn't want to sacrifice Jake's health for his own unhealthy obsession to catch the man in black and find the Dark Tower. It's wise to say that he has got the perfect companion for that, as Jake calls Roland's obsession a quest. Obsessions are bad. They hurt people. Quests are good and help people, reasons Jake, which is a rather sordid vision for a young child. Seeing that Jake is still eager to move, Roland takes out the bullet and starts twirling it between his fingers as he speaks. He tells Jake about the walled city of Gilead and the evil priest Martin. The hypnosis causes Jake to fall asleep. While Jake sleeps, Roland creates an overhead shade to keep the boy warm. He talks to himself or the sleeping boy as he ruminates over the man in black's identity. Roland wonders if Martin and Walter are the same or twin brothers. He has never seen them together and deduces that there might be other versions of the evil priest, just as Roland expects there to be more of himself, all reaching the Dark Tower. As Roland and Jake continue with their journey, they somehow find an alternate path that helps them bypass the coldest regions, yet the snowcaps still await them. The vegetation grows as they come across witchgrass, dwarf spruce, and crickets. However, all this walking and the chilling air drain them. Roland offers Jake water and asks him to close his eyes and listen. Jake follows the stream and hears it, but still shares the remaining water with Roland. The two eventually find a beautiful waterfall with clear water, and Jake asks if he could take a swim. Roland lets him, but remains on guard. The water is cold, but that doesn't deter young Jake from enjoying splashing in the water. Roland tells him that they can stay for as long as Jake wants. Fondness for the little boy has changed Roland and brought out a more mature and patient attitude. However, Jake stops short when he spots something on the slopes of the mountain. At first, the tiny speck looks like a lizard on a hill, but as he progresses, Roland and Jake realize that it's the man in black who is climbing ahead of them. Jake comes up from the water and gets dressed. Roland confirms it's the man in black, and now he doesn't want to waste any more time. The sooner they reach the other side, the quicker Roland can get his revenge on the man in black. Roland and Jake continue with their journey, and Jake wonders what's beyond the mountain, but nobody knows. He is still left bewildered by the ungodly sight of the man in black climbing such a steep slope. While Jake continues to talk about him, Roland keeps quiet and settles down to camp. Roland hands Jake flint and steel to start a fire for the approaching night. He orders Jake not to wander off towards the willows as sucker bats hide in the shadow. Their bites could prove fatal, sending Jake to another world. It might be the reason Roland has become more conscious as he heads into the jungle to hunt for food. He kills 3 bunnies with 3 shots for dinner, but it can't be that easy, right? Roland feels someone touched him on the shoulder, and Roland can sense ill magic lurking in the air. He waits, but when nothing appears, Roland starts cutting some vines to turn them into ropes. He accidentally cuts his hand, and the blood makes the vampire bats attack. Roland shoots them down, but it still means ammo is used up. Ammo that could come in handy when the gunslinger meets more sinister creatures. Roland throws the dead bats back to the trees so that they don't spoil the river. Roland hates the place, but they need to rest. When he returns to Jake, the boy has already made a good fire. Jake has been attentive and asks what the bullets are used for, since he could only see 3 rabbits. Roland lies and tells it's an echo, and as for the cut, he claims to have got it while shaving. Roland says all this with stubble on his face, but Jake doesn't poke him further. Exhaustion takes over Jake as soon as he is done with dinner. Roland covers him and muses to himself. He wonders if Jake will survive his dark fate or if catching up with the man in black will doom the boy. Without Jake, Roland wouldn't have taken any rest, and traveled until he caught up to the man in black. Surely noticing him climbing the slopes has made Roland more restless. However, the only reason Roland is biding his time is to prolong Jake's life. As thunder strikes in the sky, Roland checks the jawbone of the speaking demon and ponders the prophecy. In his sleep, Roland dreams about being restrained and held back by villagers while he watches Susan Delgado being burned for the 1000th time. He can hear her cries, her burning hair, and the cries of the cherry tree. But something has changed. Instead of saying, "Roland, I love thee," Susan says, "The boy! Roland, the boy! See to the boy!" Roland tries to escape the collar chain and the restraints, but a hoarse voice escapes him, and the dark tower looms over Roland. This time, Jake peers out from a window in the dark tower. However, the boy looks like a statue, his eyes marble and spike driven through his forehead like a unicorn's horn. Roland wails in horror and wakes up from the nightmare. "Jake!" he calls out, just as he notices that his sleeves have caught fire. Roland puts it out and notices that Jake is missing. Has Jake gone to relieve himself, or did Susan warn him of any danger? The gunslinger wonders. His questions are answered by a wordless cry from the willow jungle. Roland hurriedly follows Jake's track in the moonlight and dew, splashing through the spring and into the deep, dark depths of the willow jungle. Like a beast, the gunslinger sniffs the air to get a whiff of Jake, and even with the willow reeds cutting through his face, Roland follows. He comes up to a clearing with gleaming, skull-white light. Roland finds Jake in the middle of Stonehenge, captivated by an oracle succubus spirit. The succubus has left the kid catatonic and unable to speak, so a deep groan escapes him. "Jake!" Roland calls out to the kid, but he remains unmoved, yet the succubus speaks to Roland and invites the gunslinger into her circle. She releases the boy but proceeds to seduce the gunslinger. It seems to work as Roland gets entrapped in her enchantment. The succubus urges Roland to forget the dark tower, but as she edges closer to him, Roland thrusts the jawbone at her. "Begone!" he shouts as Roland tries to send the demonic creature back to its realm. Chapter 5. The Prophecy. The succubus reveals her demonic face as Roland the gunslinger brandishes the jawbone in front of her. Roland tells her to stay away from Jake, but the oracle claims to know their future and wagers that her embrace is better than what awaits them. Roland tries to make a deal with the oracle and asks her to let them go for now, but promises to be back and pay her for the prophecy. The oracle mocks Roland's belief that he has free will, but as a gunslinger, Roland lives by the code, which still gives him some power over the creature of the dark. He warns the oracle that he can send her back to Naar, but the oracle is not frightened and assures Roland that he will not be the first human she will dispatch. The oracle agrees to Roland's proposition, but upon the condition that if he reneges, Jake's life will be forfeited. The oracle vanishes with a creepy and horrific scream, and Roland leaves with the unconscious Jake. Roland wakes up Jake and shows him the jawbone. He explains that the item has strong mojo and can ward off evil. Jake wakes up enough to say whatever and goes back to sleep, while Roland carries him to the campsite. Roland notices that Jake feels light from dehydration as he leaves the Stonehead. Roland promises to return after ensuring the boy is safe. "He will never be safe with thee, never," a voice whispers as he leaves. As Roland lays the boy near the campfire, he looks at his saint-like, pure face. Jake's face reminds him of Susan Delgado and his unborn son, who died in the same fire in Susan's belly. Roland has come to think of Jake as his unborn son. A part of Roland died with Susan that day. With Jake, Roland can see the life he could have had with his own son. So, to make sure that Jake is safe, he ties up Jake's arm to a dried shrub. This way the succubus won't lure him away in his sleep. "Good night, son," Roland Deschain whispers before going to sleep. The next morning, Jake wakes up Roland and inquires about the rope binding his hand. Jake gets cheeky as he asks if it's some kind of gunslinger kink that he is not old enough to understand. Roland unties Jake but doesn't tell him the whole truth, as he explains that Jake had run away sleepwalking. Jake finds that hard to believe and gets disgusted when Roland shows him the jawbone. Roland hands it to Jake and asks him to keep it close as it will protect him from demons. Jake is not at all happy with how his morning started, and on top of it, Roland leaves him alone with the bone to keep his promise to the oracle. The gunslinger takes a mescaline drug and asks Jake to stay in the camp while he is gone. Jake asks what the drug is for, and the gunslinger explains that it will help him speak to demons. Leaving Jake with the warning and the bone, the gunslinger returns to the stone circle while the psychedelic drug starts to take effect. Jake had asked if the drug had hurt him, but Roland had never really enjoyed being lost in his senses. However, this time he stays calm and starts seeing things. He enjoys the forest's beauty and the light until he approaches the stone circle. Roland enters the circle and lies on a stone bench, ready to fornicate with the succubus. He notes how far he has come from lying with the pure Susan on sweet grass to a succubus in an enchanted forest. He asks the oracle to make her prophecy and hears the faint sound of weeping. The oracle was not sure that Roland would return, but as the gunslinger points out, the line of Eld always keep their promises. The oracle rewards Roland by taking on the appearance of Susan Delgado. However, Roland wouldn't let the spirit consume him without a prophecy, so he insists. The spirit ignores Roland and reaches out to his belt, asking for mercy and favor at the same time, but Roland moves away angrily. He admonishes the spirit for uttering the word and rebukes her for luring away Jake. The spirit confesses that it's him that she really wanted, but Roland wouldn't let her touch him unless she tells him the truth. Maybe the oracle says the truth when she justifies that Roland doesn't want the truth, but a fantasy where he finds the Dark Tower and returns Gilead to its former glory. Roland refuses to indulge in the oracle's lies and seduction as he screams, "Prophecy! Truth!" The spirit still continues to chant, and Roland's eyes get darker as he says, "Truth, now." The oracle gives in and asks Roland to sleep. He agrees to only half sleep, and the oracle finally shows him the truth. The oracle tells Roland of different worlds, empires rising and falling. She tells the gunslinger to find the doorways for the other worlds and watch for the roses. 3. This is the number of your fate. 3 stands at the heart of your quest. Another number comes later. Now the number is 3. The oracle speaks of 3, but she is not finished. She continues. The first is young, dark hair. He stands on the brink of robbery and murder. A demon named Heroin has infested him. The second comes on wheels, and the third, death, but not for you. Roland is still not satisfied as he wants to know the future of a certain man in black. The oracle assures him that they will soon palaver. Roland then asks the oracle about Jake's future, and the oracle replies, "The boy is your gate to the man in black. The man in black is your gate to the 3. The 3 are your way to the Dark Tower." Roland calls the oracle a star slut and whore of the winds, and he asks her if Jake could be spared. The oracle suggests that Roland can stop and head back northwest to save the boy, but he is sworn by his father's guns, and so he cannot forego the quest. Roland also mentions Martin, but the oracle claims that Martin was devoured by the man in black. Finally satisfied with the answers, Roland lies back and allows the oracle to invade him. As the succubus rides Roland, she transforms into various women from Roland's past, starting with Sylvia Pittston, Alice of Tull, and Susan. As the spirit climaxes, Roland suddenly gets up and shoves the oracle away. "Let me be, get away from me. Nothing that I've learned justifies this feeling of defilement," says Roland as he refuses to let Oracle screw him. Roland curses the spirit to remain trapped in its stone prison to rot hungry and alone as he angrily leaves. However, the spirit agrees about having a terrible fate indeed, yet she wouldn't trade it for one like Roland Deschaines. Meanwhile, it's been a whole day and Jake muses to himself about sitting idle with just a crude bone for company. He is overjoyed when Roland returns and embraces him. Roland looks sick and claims to be, just as Jake points out that Roland looks whipped, like a married man. Roland finds the custom strange but indulges the boy. He allows Jake to get rid of the jawbone, and Jake throws it into the fire. Roland suggests taking a rest and sleeping for the night, while Jake asks Roland never to leave him again. Roland and Jake resume their journey, and a few days later, the duo find themselves in a cold, damp forest with shorter trees. Jake asks if anything is young in this world, and Roland notes that Jake is one of them. Roland checks for the man in black's footprint, and a week later, they are taking the southeast route looking for him. Jake halts suddenly as he can smell the man in black, and Roland agrees. Although the gunslinger is not the best father figure, Jake loves that he is becoming more like Roland. However, as they inch closer to the waterfall and the narrow mountain road, Jake suddenly suffers a panic attack. He insists on going back as he feels Roland is going to kill him. And I don't mean like, whoa, my dad's gonna kill me. I mean, the man in black killed me the first time and you're going to kill me this time, says the boy honestly. Roland tries to dismiss the little boy's fear, but he can see the truth in Roland's eyes. "You'll be alright," says Roland, but Jake thinks he is lying. "Because he is a boy," the man in black answers from the adjacent mountain. The man in black claims to tell the truth and teases Roland, making him angry. As the man in black bids them good day, Roland lets his gun speak. However, the bullets don't reach the man in black, and he asks Roland to come down to talk to him. He invites Roland to the other side of the mountain to palaver, which, as you know, means to discuss. "Just the two of us," the man in black mentions with a grin, and leaves. The sentence weighs heavily between Jake and Roland as it becomes clear that Jake doesn't make it to the end. Roland gives Jake a simple offer: come with me or stay. But Jake doesn't have many options. It's not like someone else is going to save him and serve him cakes, sandwiches, or coffee. Roland asks Jake to choose his own destiny, but the boy chooses Roland. The Man in Black, Chapter 1, Into the Mountain. It's the final story of the Gunslinger's manhunt as we see how Roland Deschain grew from a boy to the last gunslinger of Gilead. With that in mind, the narrator tells that Jake and Roland have now reached a waterfall within the mountains. They have set up camp for the night, but the icy cold air is gnawing on their skin. Soon they will have to travel through the cavernous path of the mountain, and so they have to soak up as much sun as they can. While Jake sleeps soundly, Roland uses the time to make torches using rabbit fur and fat. As he pokes the campfire, Roland struggles to find anything to think about. The past is depressing and the present damn, so Roland resorts to seeing the future. If myths are to be believed, devil grass set on fire helps see the future, while demons dance in the flames. Roland throws some into the fire to get some clarity, but instead he is tormented by visions from his past. At first he gets a vision of Susan Delgado burning brightly, and then he sees himself shooting his own mother. The fiendish fire also shows Roland how Elaine died from being accidentally wounded by Roland, and the death of Allie from Tall. The massacre of Tall appears in the fire, and it's likely that Roland may have killed more people than the Man in Black. As Roland wonders if Jake will be next, the Man in Black appears in the fire. He warns Roland that it's not if, but when, as he will eventually have to sacrifice the boy to reach his goal and the Dark Tower. Only then will the killings be rightfully justified. Roland challenges the Man in Black to face him in person, but Walter or Martin or whoever he is, the Man in Black refuses. The Man in Black claims that such a meeting is not worth his time. It instigates Roland to finish off Jake so that they can palaver on the other side of the mountain. Never, shouts the gunslinger, and the Man in Black changes track. He claims to be more of a father to Roland than Stephen Deschain. The Man in Black calls Roland his spiritual heir and feels proud to witness his body count and the way Roland has betrayed everyone he once held dear. To put a nail in the coffin, the Man in Black suggests that Roland has forgotten the face of his father, which makes Roland drain a water bag on the flames to douse it. The Man in Black turns into a raven and vanishes into the flames, while reminding Roland to meet him on the other side. Jake Chambers wakes up as soon as Roland douses the flames. Roland packs things up and suggests that they start moving through the passages below the mountains. However, Jake seems scared of the creatures that may lurk there and asks if turning back would really be a bad thing. Roland doesn't want to dally as he wants to find the Man in Black and force him to take them to the Dark Tower. Jake looks at Roland with doubt and apprehension, asking, no matter the price? But Roland has paid the price over 12 years with the blood and lives of his family and friends. So what's one more then, right? Says Jake with gloom. Roland doesn't answer the kid's question, but hands him a compass that might take him back. This is a quest, Jake. A true quest. Man's work, not child's play, says Roland with his back turned to Jake. This was perhaps Roland's way to save the boy from doom, but as Jake Chambers stands alone, he doesn't look so good. It begins to snow and tears roll down his cheeks. Shit, Jake exclaims as he stands alone and contemplates his options. He has only two choices, go back and he might be fine, or go with Roland and die. Jake wonders how many times he might have to die. He barely remembers the first time, except that it sucked. Jake packs his belongings and reasons that there is no point jeopardizing his own life for Roland and decides to go back. But where? However, if you recall, Jake is the gateway to Roland, and the father-son bond they share is not easy to sever. So Jake ventures into the mountain passageway looking for Roland and claiming that he is not a child. He goes through a large cleft and manages to light up his torch as it gets darker. Now all he needs to do is find Roland or open the Olympic ceremony. Jake's dark sense of humor helps him in this situation, as he walks through the dark, hoping the fire will keep away snakes or spider. Jake continues to ruminate over whether snakes are attracted to the warmth, while demonic creatures follow him from behind. Jake hears voices speaking and feels someone watching him. When he turns, nothing is there. Jake tells himself that it's the wind and keeps treading. He wonders if the Man in Black turns out to be Johnny Cash, the singer, but soon his fears take form as 1,000 mutant rats charge after the little boy, who screams Roland's name and runs. As Jake stumbles and falls, the deadly rats seem to take over him. He fails to realize that the rats were equally terrorized and Jake was standing in their escape route. After the rats are gone, Jake relights the torch and recites the words that Roland used to rhyme. Jake notices he is actually inside a man-made tunnel and calls out to Roland again. He hopes that Roland has taken the same route and is following the track, hoping it will lead him to Roland. As Roland had confessed, the compass goes crazy, and Jake walks upon the tracks for a long time. He comes upon what appears to be a junction, where he finds wreckage and many human skeletons. It appears something has chewed upon them. Jake realizes that the rats were probably terrified as they thought of Jake as someone else. This is probably why Jake quickly crosses the area, and he doesn't stop running until he gets far enough. Jake finds his breath straining as heart pounding, so he rests and builds a campfire. Jake is not from Midworld, and so he is aware of the rumors of throwing devil grass into the fire. As soon as he has done it, fantastical creatures like dragons are conjured in the fire. Jake is tired of the magical stuff, but the demons start speaking to him in riddles. The demons state he sees without seeing, knows without knowing, as they urge Jake to open his inner eye. As Jake sits on the railway track, he conjures up a subway train. Excellent. Well done. Superb use of the touch, especially for an amateur, says the voice. Jake wonders if he is back in New York, but something with the vision tells him it's different. The voice calls it the past of the Midworld, the past that has moved on, the past that came much before Arthur Eld. The demonic voice explains that an advanced human species once lived at that time, and that their technologies are mostly what are passed off as magic in the present. Jake finds the world closer to his own and asks if he can stay there, but the voice asks him not to dwell on the past. And if I don't have a future, says the child ruefully. Ooh, good point, says the voice. The voice probably belongs to the man in black, as a man in similar attire stands near Jake, while Jake sits on one of the benches of the train. He hears an announcement, "Long live the Imperium," and asks what it's about. The man doesn't answer and descends the train, while Jake notices that he has left his bag. Jake calls out to the man and notices it's the man in black. Jake raises the alarm as he realizes everyone is going to die. The guards in the train rush to stop Jake from screaming, while some kind of gas is released inside. People on the train start panicking and stampeding, and someone pulls the emergency stop. However, the spark from the emergency brake can easily set off a fire. Elsewhere, Roland is walking on another track when he realizes how selfish he has become. He has waited 12 years to find the tower, and can surely wait 12 more to raise Jake into a man and ensure his safety. Like a dad, Roland decides to give Jake a chance to grow up normal, experience a woman's love, and have children of his own. He hears the rumbling sound and rushes back, looking for Jake, while something explodes. Chapter 2. Fathers and Son. Roland lies on his belly as rocks fall around him after the explosion. When the cave stops shaking, he relights his torch and resumes looking for Jake. The boy hears Roland's voice calling out to him and calls back Roland's name. Roland is relieved to find Jake all right and helps him up. He assures the boy that the quest doesn't feel right without him. Jake thought Roland had left him for good and feels grateful he is back. They drink water from the river, which seems to run through the inner caverns of the mountain. Roland notices a drifting light in the water, but then it vanishes. Roland dismisses it as imagination, but Jake gets cynical. He claims getting killed has made him cynical, but it could also be the vision the man in black just showed him. Somewhere not too far from Roland and Jake walks the man in black. He is not an apparition or Roland's imagination. This guy is very real, and he muses about poor Roland, always trying to anticipate what the man in black is going to do next. As the sorcerer rightly notes, Roland is his own enemy, and the man in black's crimes are petty and small as compared to the ones committed by Roland Deathchain. The man in black knows that Roland's attempt to protect the child he will eventually destroy is futile. His chain of thought is suddenly interrupted by the sudden arrival of a greenish mutant. The mutants are hungry and they ask if they can feast on the man and the boy following the man in black. The man in black gives Jake permission to eat, but asks the trolls not to eat Roland. Trust me, you wouldn't want to eat him. He's rather tough. In the near future, Roland and Jake continue to walk in the passage under the mountain. They have lost the sense of time, and Roland suggests walking in the dark to conserve the light. Jake is skeptical because why not? He misses a step. Roland catches him and notices they are in the middle of several train tracks. Roland assures Jake that there is a small chance a train will come through and trample them. They feed on dried rabbit meat and take note of the architecture. While Roland calls the tunnels millennium old, Jake finds them oddly futuristic. The dystopian world has Roland and Jake thinking. Roland claims the tunnels used to be lit by bright tubes full of swamp gas, but Jake deduces they were fluorescent neon. Roland recalls having such lights in Gilead that were run by generators. Jake knows generators, and as he drinks the water, it tastes metallic. He wonders if the metal is screwing up the compass, but Roland explains it's due to the Dark Tower. "I'm starting to think everything is," says Jake, a little ruefully, and Roland proceeds to tell him how the Dark Tower stands at the center of Midworld. Roland explains that the Midworld is moving through the space-time continuum, and so the directions are adrift. He draws a circle with 12 lines going in opposite directions. Roland explains that each line represents a beam and has portals in and out of the Midworld. He draws the guardian animals of these beams, explaining how they hold Midworld through time, space, and size. Roland tells Jake that the Dark Tower is the nexus of power and all realities, so that history can be rewritten if one has access to it. However, the tower is falling and the world is moving. Jake starts to realize that Roland plans to rewrite his own history and bring people back to life, but Roland refuses to answer. Jake wisely points out that it's like playing God, and it never works well for those who want to play God. Roland doesn't entertain Jake and puts out the light, and they start walking in the dark, all illumination gone. Now that's quite the metaphor. The phosphorescent rocks give some light to help Roland and Jake walk, and Jake asks Roland about his friend. Jake thinks of Mrs. Shaw and his father, but drifts off. Roland asks if Jake's father was abusive, but Jake replies that he was not, and in fact, he kind of ignored Jake. Roland claims his father was similar, but he has not forgotten his father's face as a righteous gunslinger. However, the gunslinger says he pities his father for his ignorance and for neglecting his wife, which drove her to the arms of the enemy, and for his lack of empathy, which led to the fall of Gilead. As Roland begins telling Jake a story from his childhood, a flashback of Gilead plays out. It was a sewing night cotillion, and everyone was preparing food to celebrate rice and romance. Roland explained that it was the night of courtship as birds and bees filled the sky. His mother was in the vicinity of the Great Hall making out with Martin, while Roland, Cuthbert, and Elaine were 9-year-old boys who sneaked into the hall to take a peek at the grand celebration. They had hidden in the shadows and painted their face to camouflage, but really they were just too lucky not to be spotted. The boys excitedly joke about making babies, and Cuthbert creates the right distraction by pelting a horse with a rock so they can sneak in. The boys were filled with joy as they sneaked in. They were convinced that witnessing an adult event would somehow make them adults. They had hidden in the unsafe balconies and liked the danger. Roland remembers smelling the roasted pork, beef, and other foods consumed during the celebration. He also remembers his mother chatting with Martin, the gunslinger's counselor, while Roland's dad, Stephen, spoke to someone else. At one point, Martin asked Roland's mom, Gabrielle, for a dance, and everyone watched them court publicly. At that time, Stephen had just taken hold of his quartet and was about to be Din of Gilead. Stephen called Gabrielle to him when he realized others had begun to sense that something was wrong. Gabrielle was foolish to think that no one had realized that she was with Martin. Elaine and Cuthbert whispered about it while little Roland watched the drama unfold, the joy gone from his eyes. Roland calls his father the last Lord of Light and tells Jake how his father, friends, and mother died. Roland says that his mother was betrayed and she might not have wanted to survive, which makes Jake understand Roland is the one who killed her. However, Roland keeps that tale for another night. As he finishes the tale, Roland suddenly comes across a mechanism, which Jake recognizes as the handcar. Now, there were a lot of handcars in old cartoons, so naturally, Jake knows how it works. They take the handcar and Jake teaches Roland how to push the handcar. Jake finds some joy in riding the handcar, but it drains him out and he recites the commercial for Crisp Allah. As they move, Jake suddenly smells something foul and mutants appear out of nowhere. Roland asks Jake not to be afraid of them, but he is wrong as the mutants proclaim that they want to eat the little one. Chapter 3 Secret of the Mountain. As the slow mutants encroach upon the handcar from every side, Roland fires at the closest one. The gunslingers ask Jake to pump for him as he takes position to shoot as many slow mutants as he can. He asks Jake not to show fear as they can smell terror. Roland explains that the creatures are of the dark and wonders if they hate the man in black. However, that's not important now as Jake points out, more so since the bullets don't seem to kill the mutants. Roland is surprised that even a bullet to the brain does not kill the mutant. One of the mutants suddenly captures Jake and pulls him from the handcar. Roland grabs the hand of the boy and keeps shooting at the mutant. Meanwhile, internally, Roland starts debating whether this is the end for the boy and whether he should let the boy go or risk getting killed while trying to help him. Roland makes a decision as he asks Jake to jump. Jake gets back on the handcar and Roland keeps on shooting the mutants, but still, the stinky mutants don't die. Jake trembles as he thinks Roland will leave him to be mutant food, and Roland ignores him. As Jake clings to the gunslinger, he starts pumping ahead. The cart runs over the mutants and Roland assures the shaken up Jake that the mutants will never get him. Jake looks up after they have passed the mutants and Jake asks Roland if he really wasn't going to leave him. Roland lies with conviction, assuring the boy that they are just getting started. In recent times, this is the longest Roland has stayed with anybody. Their conversations come to a halt when Roland notices that the mutants have blocked the tracks ahead with rocks. Roland reloads his gun and asks Jake to move the rocks so he can shoot the mutants lurking behind. Jake is too afraid to get down from the cart and move the rock, but it's the only way, and so he gets down and starts mindlessly removing the rocks while mutants close in on him. Roland shoots as many mutants as he can spot, and the bullets light up the passageway, but almost blind Roland. When one of the mutants gets hold of Jake, he screams with all his might, and Roland has to rely on his gunslinger instinct to take the shot. Bullseye! As Roland shoots right on the head of the mutant, allowing Jake to get free. The boy starts throwing rocks at the mutants, and Roland has to stop him to get him back on the handcar. Roland wraps the little boy, who is like his son, into into his arms as he pushes the handcar, running over the rest of the mutants. The sight of the squashed mutants disgusts Jake, but Roland has seen worse and is unbothered. As Roland speeds past the truck, Jake rambles on about how his father once got ticketed for speeding. He asks Roland to slow down, but Roland ignores him. The duo moves in the same manner for 3 days if time means anything. On the 4th day, they spot some light, and Jake mistakes it for sunlight, but it turns out to be like a terminal. Roland doesn't know what a terminal is, and Jake talks about Grand Central, which Roland doesn't recognize either. Jake mentions a subway, but then Roland is not aware of subway. Jake lets it go and moves on to how the midworld is confusing and how everything that ever existed or will exist is smushed together. Roland changes the subject, asking if Jake has read the words above the tunnel they have entered. Jake has read, and it says track 10 to surface and points west. Roland has read it too and wonders if it's the route of the high speech. The duo starts getting playful as Jake laughs at Roland's speech. As he gets on the platform, Jake claims that Roland sounds like a pirate. "This is not the time for laughter, Jake," says Roland. "Around here it never is," says Jake with exasperation. As they peer into the station, they find a man sleeping inside. Well, not exactly sleeping, as Roland points out. Jake tries to wake up the man and finds that he has died. Roland is proven right. "Are you happy?" Jake asks. "Almost never," replies the gunslinger. The gunslinger looks at the desiccated face of the dead man and deduces that he was killed by some form of gas. A gas that was made by the old people, as Vinay had told Roland and his friends in Gilead. Jake bets that the old people fought wars with this gas and turned other old people into mummies. Roland moves away from the corpse as he finds a weapon store. Jake jokes that it's a standard issue at a subway station, while Roland thinks it might have been a military location. However, all that the weapon store has are rifles and big guns. Jake jokes, asking if there are guns with training wheels. Roland doesn't get it and wonders if he is talking about cannons. Jake asks Roland to forget it and leaves to check out the rest of the place, while Roland warns Jake to steer clear of the river. He has noticed corpse lamps and asks Jake not to look into the water. However, Jake might not have heard it, or maybe he was already drawn to the water as Jake inches towards the river. The narrator asks us not to judge the little boy for not heeding the command. Jake lies down on a platform and drinks the river water when he suddenly spots stars in the water. However, they are inside the mountain and there are no stars above. Jake hears voices from the water calling out his name. The wraiths in the water carry small lanterns. They tell Jake how Roland knows that he is going to die and has already prepared for it. They tell him that Roland will leave him and ask Jake to join them. Jake listens and jumps into the water. Chapter 4. End of the Road. Jake feels at peace under the water, but Roland disturbs it and Jake is confused when Roland hauls him out. Roland questions Jake for not listening to him, but Jake didn't know what corpse lights are. Well, now he does, and he recalls seeing zombies. Jake suddenly notices that Roland has bows and arrows, not guns. Roland confesses that the guns were non-functional and they are the only weapons he could salvage. Jake jokes, asking Roland not to shoot apples off his head. Jake asks Roland about the war in Midworld, and Roland explains that it was more of a revolution. They had won every battle but lost the war. No one won the war except the scavengers who benefited from it. Roland gets deep and thoughtful as he claims that peace is the unnatural state of affairs. Roland laments about Gilead falling, but that's enough dwelling on the past, and he prepares to leave, but Jake refuses. Jake demands to know if the gunslinger was really going to abandon him and has already prepared himself for Jake's eventual death. Tough question. And it gets tougher when Jake says, "Is my death the Man in Black's price for the Dark Tower?" Jake has finally grasped the truth that Roland Deathchain won't get what he wants until Jake Chambers is dead. Renewed with confidence, Jake determines to take his chances by himself, but Roland leaves him with a long days and pleasant nights courtesy. "You made a deal with someone. I know you did," exclaims Jake from the back. Roland could have ignored Jake or bluffed, but he remains silent, while Jake gets more intuitive. The boy asks if the gunslinger is going to trade him for the Dark Tower. Once again, Roland stays silent, as the truth would have set him free. Roland would have sold his soul for the Dark Tower, but he dares not say it, Jake. The boy calls out Roland's name, which echoes throughout the cavern. Jake's paranoia hits as he feels like he can hear the slow mutants approaching. Jake rushes back to Roland, asking him to wait. Fear trumps ego for Jake, and Roland was intentionally slowing the car down so that Jake could reach it. It appears Jake was only bluffing to be pissed, and Roland caught it. Roland also catches the boy in a hearty embrace. Now, this could have been our happy ending, but as the narrator had pointed out time and again, it's not that kind of story. So the two begin pumping the car again, and following the track as far as it leads them. At one point, Roland lets Jake pump so that he can light up the arrows and shoot them. It's to get an idea of what lies ahead for them. Roland tries to get the arrow to fly around 60 yards ahead, but it goes out after it drops. Roland deduces that there is water or some form of moisture. As they continue to pump the car in that direction, Jake asks Roland what a win looks like. If you get to the tower, is that a win? Even if I die? Asks Jake. Right now, the most poignant one. Roland assures Jake that he matters if that's what Jake wants to know. Roland preaches that the journey is important, not the end. But does he really believe that? Jake knows Roland doesn't believe that and pokes him about it, but Roland lets it slide. Roland stops and shoots a few other arrows. All of them fall down and are put out. Roland instructs Jake to pull the car to a stop. They have finally come outside of the mountain, but now they come across a dilapidated rail bridge. Jake wonders if the man in black wants them to cross it or drown. However, Roland doesn't think this trap is worth the man in black's time. The mummified man in the station crumbled to dust, and Roland is afraid that the bridge will collapse in a similar manner. He tells Jake that they are going to walk now. Jake goes ahead of Roland, but it's more of a well-calculated, wise choice than a brave one. Jake points out that he weighs much less than Roland, and so if Roland causes the bridge to collapse, it will be behind him. There's a good chance of that as the cross ties are covered in rust. Despite the creaks and groans as well as the wind swaying them, Jake and Roland walk over the tracks. Jake seems to be more confident and even retains its sense of humor, but Roland has other things on his mind. Behind him, the hand car has melted into the fog, and they are not sure how close they are to the other end. Jake suddenly loses his balance, but still manages to hold on, and Roland warns him not to joke around. It wasn't a joke, and Jake gets terrified. Jake notes a hole ahead and asks Roland to be cautious. They start playing a childhood game called Simon Says or Mother May I, depending on whether you are from New York or Gilead. Nevertheless, Jake guides the gunslinger to cross the large gap in the tracks. As Roland takes the next step, the bar suddenly breaks off, and Roland tries to grab onto something. He doesn't find anything and starts falling. But don't worry, it was just the gunslinger's very realistic imagination. Jake checks if Roland is alright, and then he starts leaping across the ties so that he can jump. This was necessary because many of the ties were missing. Roland marvels at Jake's confidence and bravery, failing to realize that Jake knows he is on borrowed time. Dying once and knowing that death is almost certain has given him the courage to run with his arms spread like he is flying. As Jake gets lost in the fog, Roland calls out to him. The cross ties have become increasingly rotten as they progress, and Jake notes they might not hold for much longer. He mischievously asks Roland to go back, testing Roland's patience. For the love of the man Jesus, walk, says Roland as he and Jake resume walking. They can see the glow of daylight ahead, and Roland decides that they are almost near the end. Well, almost. Perhaps we'll have the man in black yet, says Roland, and perhaps his evil will die. But no such luck, as from the fogs a sinister yet familiar voice says, "Hello, boys." The silhouette of the man in black appears along with his sarcastic voice. His evil laugh shakes the metal, and then, as it was inevitable, the metal breaks and Jake falls. He manages to hang on to the bridge and fervently asks for Roland's help. This is it. This is the moment that Roland was preparing for. On one hand, the evil man in black incites Roland to abandon the boy, while on the other, the boy dangles like a living tarot card. Is it time the gunslinger either chose to finish off the evil or save the innocent and lost boy? Roland reaches out to Jake to help him up, but the man in black teases Roland as he says, "Do I go? Do I go and forever take the Dark Tower with me?" "Help me, Roland," says Jake, but the man in black says, "Very well, then I shall leave you." The words instigate Roland to abandon all hope and consciousness. "No, you shall not," he exclaims and runs towards the man in black, forgetting Jake even if it's for a moment. "Jake," he remembers, but Jake is finally disillusioned. "Go then, there are other worlds than these," says Jake, and lets go of his hands. As Jake plummets towards the water, Roland Deschain stands in utter shock. He has again betrayed a loved one. Chapter 5. Polliver. The moment Jake Chambers falls and gets swallowed into the abyss, Roland suddenly becomes the boy, and the boy becomes him. This is death. Is it? Is it? He asks. But the man in black doesn't say much as he simply turns around and orders the gunslinger to follow. The gunslinger does as he is told. The man in black asks Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger of Gilead, about what he gave up, soul, conscience, or the boy's safety. He notes that Roland cannot give up what he never had, but the thing he can give up, he never will. This This is probably a reference to revenge and the Dark Tower. Roland says he hates the Man in Black, but the evil priest claims to admire Roland. The Man in Black calls their meeting the end of the beginning. The gunslinger pulls his gun and fires 12 times, but the bullets don't hit the Man in Black. The Man in Black was about to pull down his shroud, but he didn't. The Man in Black is unfazed and unbothered as he takes Roland to the killing ground, a harsh, dry field where carcasses of various animals lie. Roland speaks to Cuthbert, acknowledging that he is in the west. The Man in Black sits on the ground and asks Roland to gather wood. Roland claims that he will kill the Man in Black, but the evil sorcerer assures him that he won't and he can't. They have reached the other side of the mountain and it's still a bit cold, so they need fire. It's surprising how Roland behaves like a common boy as he gathers the wood and sits opposite the Man in Black while the sun sets. The Man in Black mocks Roland, calling him exceptional and resourceful. He then lights the wood with magic and takes out the carcass of a rabbit to cook dinner. Roland helps in roasting the rabbit and gives it to the Man in Black while he remains content with the last pieces of jerky. Roland confesses that he has sores in his mouth and the salty jerky hurts him. Yet it's a safer option than the Man in Black's enchanted meat. The Man in Black now removes his cowl and shows his true face to the gunslinger, a face that Roland is not so familiar with. Roland expected him to be older, but then the Man in Black is almost immortal like Roland. The Man in Black asks Roland to see the sunset as he will not see another sunrise for a long time. Now, what is a magician without cards? So it's time for a card trick as the Man in Black brings out tarot cards. The Man in Black claims to have read tarot cards in Gilead as Martin. The Man in Black draws 7 cards. The first is the Hanging Man, the Sailor, the Gunslinger, the Prisoner, the Lady of the Shadows with 2 faces, Death, and the Tower. Roland asks why the Man in Black is showing him the cards, but the Man in Black has no answer and asks Roland to just watch. He keeps the Tower card above the Hanged Man, which might mean that Jake was the gateway to the Tower. The Man in Black claims that he doesn't know all the answers, as he is just the emissary for someone greater. The Man in Black asks Roland to sleep, but Roland tries to jump on the Man in Black and strangle him. However, the Man in Black becomes the darkness that fills Roland's surroundings. In the void, Roland looks for the Man in Black, who again begins speaking in riddles. Anyway, Roland is soon tired and lies down to sleep. To help him, the Man in Black conjures an image of the stars and galaxies. He shows Roland a primitive world filled with dinosaurs, and suddenly it's all gone, and Roland is falling from the sky. The Man in Black shows Roland how Earth and Moon were formed. The Man in Black suddenly stops, and another voice cries out, "Let there be light." The loud voice is accompanied by blinding light, and Roland still hangs in space. He pleads with the Man in Black to stop, but the man asks Roland to give up on his quest and start focusing on saving his soul. "Never," shouts the gunslinger, and flees the light, while the Man in Black claims that he tried the same trick with Stephen Deschain, but it didn't work. The man claims that the vision is of the universe. He warns Roland that the tower will kill him, and so he can't have the tower. Roland asks what the light at the end of his vision meant, but the man stays quiet, and Roland assumes he doesn't know. At last, Roland explains that the world was more advanced in earlier generations. The North Central Positronics, or NCP, is the company that owns everything in that world. The Man in Black presents examples of a fish with a baited hook and a wooden pencil to show that there are universes within universes. He finishes up saying all universes meet in a single nexus, the Dark Tower. The Man in Black asks Roland if he would dare to climb to the top of the tower. After these rhetorical discussions, Roland starts to feel cold, and the Man in Black orders him to build the fire. This part of the story drags on and shows how the Man in Black is trying to tell Roland that the Dark Tower is unattainable. The man even confesses to working for a king, but claims that he has never seen him. However, Roland will, but first he must kill the ageless stranger called Legion. After this, the Man in Black refuses to tell anything anymore about the end world to Roland. At last, Roland asks for directions to the Dark Tower, and the Man in Black asks him to go west. He also reveals that he is the one who appeared as Martin, the counselor to the gunslingers of Gilead. However, he is also Walter from Tull. The Man in Black offers to tell Roland stories, but Roland is not interested, and the Man in Black reminds Roland of the prophecy. After leaving Roland with more riddles and questions, the Man in Black bids goodbye. As he leaves, the man says, "Let there be light." Roland wakes up with the light of the sun, but finds a skeleton beside him instead of the Man in Black. While Roland and the Man in Black spoke, 10 years had passed, and Roland had grown older with white hair. The skeleton has a laughing face and a black robe, so Roland realizes that it's the Man in Black. Roland wonders how many lies the Man in Black told him, lies that were mixed with truth. As Roland begins walking towards the Dark Tower again, he confesses that he loves Jake. By evening, he reaches the ocean, the end of land as directed by the Man in Black. He sits on the deserted beach, then lies on his back to dream about the Dark Tower. Shimi's Tale, Chapter 1, Breakers of the Spider King. Remember the half-wit and innocent boy called Shimi? Yes, the one that Roland, Elaine, and Cuthbert befriended in Hanbury. Well, this is his story, and it's a pretty important one. Shimi is currently imprisoned in Devar Toy, the prison of psychics or breakers in the realm of Thunderclap. It is guarded by anthropomorphic animals at all times. Shimi weeps as he was always afraid of prison and barbed wire. When he was a baby, Shimi was thrown into the sheriff's lockup, and he had soiled his clothes as he cried. However, the sheriff's lockup was minuscule in front of the huge Devar Toy. In End-World language, Devar Toy refers to a big prison, and it's the only thing that is there in the dark desert land of Thunderclap. Inside the prison, it's like a town where people, or rather individuals with psychic powers, roam around freely, indulge in ice cream, and pretend to live a normal life. The guards, with a facade of being human, keep a watchful eye on the residents. They work for the Crimson King, who has kept the psychics well fed and confined. Shimi's friend Ted has told him that a prison doesn't need to have bars or windows if the bars are in mind. However, Shimi seems to be the only one wanting to get out of the prison, as others are far gone in their minds to care. And so internally, Shimi calls upon Roland to help them break out of Devar Toy. Shimi explains that all the prisoners in Devar Toy are breakers, which constitute telepaths, precogs, postcogs, and proggers. The guards force them to just sit and raise their minds, but when they do, bad things happen. Shimi feels that breaking is harmful because it unleashes monsters and slowly kills the world. Outside the barbed wire is the desert of Thunderclap, and the atomic sun that lights up Devar Toy doesn't shine there. Naturally, the people and creatures that live in the desert are mutated and deformed. The guards give the prisoners slippers, not shoes, so they can't run away into the desert. Speaking of running away, Shimi recalls an incident from his life working in a slaughterhouse in Hanbury. A little pig tried to jump over the barbed wire, but the guards shot it in the head. Shimi witnessed a similar incident involving one of the breakers. Shimi's friend Danny is a painter, and she told him that the Devar Toy was made by a monster spider. She explained that before the world was made, everything was a primordial soup where the spider lived with his family. But when the Dark Tower made the universe from the Prim, the Spider King and his family were locked out and forced to starve. This is the story of the Crimson King, and Danny explained that now he wants to destroy the Dark Tower so that his family can return and feast on the wreckage. Shimi told Danny how he once fought the Crimson King to save Roland, and Danny told him that it is actually the Crimson King who is using the breakers to break away the Dark Tower's beam. Heeding Danny's instruction, Shimi tried to open his mind and watch the beam. They were like rainbows, and the breaker monsters were chewing on them. One of the rainbows turned into an injured boy and asked Shimi why he was hurting him, and Shimi decided not to break the beams anymore. However, Shimi can't just stop breaking, as the guards will know and shoot him down. So he needs to do something that appears to be breaking the law. Despite being a half-wit, Shimi had the clever idea to telepathically share his story so it would reach Roland and he could come to rescue him. So he begins with the time he was born. Coral Thorin, the sister of Mayor Thorin of Hanbury, and a woman named Petty helped Shimi's mother, Dolores Shemer, give birth to Shimi. However, Dolores died while giving birth, and from birth, Shimi had a deformity. Shimi guesses his real pop is Stanley the barkeep. Dolores was a prostitute working in the Traveler's Rest, while Stanley called Shimi a Reap-Tide mooncalf. So Shimi believes he might be the child of a demon moon of the Reap. Everyone discovered that Shimi was growing slowly and was a half-wit. Thorin made him work in the Traveler's Rest so that he could afford his living. Shimi's story is enhanced by many childlike drawings. Shimi started having dreams about a box and a pink ball with a red eye. Shimi also says he knew the big coffin hunters were up to no good, but for the gunslingers, Shimi knew they were good. The pink ball is Marilyn's grapefruit that had ensnared Roland as chain. Shimi recalls how the older gunslingers sent their son to get it, unaware of how dangerous it was. Looking back, Shimi feels he should have known that the ball wanted to trap Roland, as he posed as a threat to the Crimson King's master plan. Shimi goes through all that happened to him, including how the psychic enhancer assistant robot gave him the power. Shimi had used the powers to teleport and help his friends, Elaine, Cuthbert, and Roland. Bert had accidentally shot him, but Shimi didn't die. He got into Marilyn's grapefruit and saved Roland from the Crimson King. At that time, Shimi didn't know the Crimson King, but the Crimson King knew that Shimi was a breaker, and he ordered the wizard to bring Shimi in. Shimi managed to escape and head to Gilead, but by that time, Gilead had fallen, and the wizard stole Marilyn's grapefruit for the Crimson King. Shimi remembers running away with Roland's quartet, but instead of finding the Dark Tower, Randolph had betrayed Shimi and sold him to the Crimson King. In the ball, Shimi had seen all his friends except Roland die. Martin the wizard took Shimi to the End World based on the Crimson King's instructions. potions. Martin also carried Marilyn's grapefruit, but he assured Shimi that he would finally receive the respect that he deserved. Yet Shimi knew he had to escape. It was like a slaughterhouse where the brains of twins are cultivated to create an enzyme. Martin told Shimi that the enzymes are fed to the breakers to make them stronger. Shimi had realized he needed to escape as he could be the subject of further experimentation. So Shimi used his powers to break free and run as fast as he could, while the wizard ordered the guards to catch him. Chapter 2. The Great Ones. Shimi the Breaker makes a run for it after blasting off the walls of the prison hospital. He gets scared and his legs feel like wood, while the guards of the Red King are already after him. Shimi musters up all the courage and finds a headless robotic horse to ride on. He zaps the horse into action and the horse runs fast, but the guards follow. They try to stop Shimi before he reaches the devil's arse. However, Shimi has a tendency not to watch where he is going, and as he looks back to see how near the guards are, he doesn't see what's in front. Shimi remembers how Coral Thorn warned him that one day he would fall into a hole. She was right, as Shimi fails to notice that a bridge is broken and falls right through it, along with the headless horse. Coral Thorn also tried to teach Shimi to swim, but he could never get the hang of it, and so he sank in the river of Thunderclap. However, Shimi doesn't drown, and even as air bubbles come out of his body, he hears deep water creatures speaking to him. The primordial creatures welcome Shimi as the son of Stanley, the Breaker, and of the Tet of Eld. The creatures claimed that they were waiting for somebody like Shimi who could hear their voices. Shimi describes the creatures as big and hungry, while they debate whether to eat him or make him one of them. The creature asks Shimi if he would like to merge his soul with the children of the Prim and destroy the beams that make their prison. Shimi screams a big no, but the giant tentacle creatures ignore him. The creatures call themselves the Great Ones, the first lords of Midworld. They claim eternity and show Shimi what the world was like before Midworld was born. They show Shimi the waters of the Prim that covered the earth, and the Great Ones fed on other smaller creatures. However, all that ended when the Dark Tower emerged from the ocean. Gan, the supreme creator or deity, erected the tower to create a new world, balancing time, space, size, and all dimensions. But the Great Ones argue that Gan was jealous of their feeding and wanted to usurp their power. The creatures show Shimi the Beam Boys who blinded the creatures of the Prim. Gan's servants made the Prim recede, and the singing roses surrounding the Dark Tower tortured the minds of the creatures, forcing them to back away. Since then, the great Prim creatures have been starving. As they speak, the tentacle creatures capture Shimi and then proceed to show him the future. In this nightmarish future, the tentacles rise again, covering the tip of the Dark Tower and preventing the rainbow lights from emanating. In the future vision, Shimi has become part of the creatures and appears as a monstrous being. Red beams radiate from his eyes and hurt the Beam Boys captured by the tentacles. Shimi's vision suddenly changes and he sees Petty, Coral Thorin, Stanley, and everyone from the Traveler's Rest dying, while Roland and his quartet are captured by the tentacles. The thought of no tower and everybody dying helps Shimi come to himself. He conjures a spear of light and uses it to kill the monsters. Shimi was ready to die being a hero as he had no breath left in him, but suddenly something started to pull him upwards and the monsters had to recede. It sounded like music to him as Shimi floated upwards and finally someone grabbed his arm. It was the Beam Boys and they had saved him with their singing. Shimi is the one who has saved the Beam Boys and the boys have saved him in return. They are okay, but only for now, as suddenly giant claws appear above and Shimi remembers he is underwater. It is the wizard, the Birdman, who had brought Shimi to the Endworld. He grabs Shimi from the water and returns him to Devar Toy. Shimi finishes telling his story to Roland, hoping that he hears him and comes to rescue the breakers from the prison. Meanwhile, Shimi promises to protect the Beam Boys as they are the weak ones now. Evil Ground. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Heroes. This is one of the tales of the gunslingers of Gilead, especially of Roland Deschain. The man in black has fled across the desert, and Roland is in hot pursuit. The trail has taken him to the Destoya Mountains, located in the far west of Midworld. He notices a shelter of sorts and checks the place out for booby traps, in case the man in black has left him any. There's none so far, and the fire was put out only a short while ago. Roland leaves his horse Topsy to feed on the witchgrass in the area, and looks for clues in the shelter, hoping the campfire was built by the man in black. However, all he finds is stale bacon, so Roland eats it and decides to camp in the shelter for the night. He gathers some wood from nearby and hunts the foolish rabbit that was curiously watching Roland build the fire. After dining on the rabbit, Roland lies down by the fire and recites a long-forgotten poem from his past. However, when he falls asleep, Topsy suddenly stirs. The horse starts whining and panics, trying to rouse Roland, but he is deep in sleep and fails to notice the ghost that has appeared. The ghost of a hobo appears beside the campfire campfire and sucks on the discarded rabbit bones. The ghost consumes whatever is left inside the bones and cackles in joy at finding some food. Perhaps the hobo hasn't yet realized that he is dead. Meanwhile, a flock of crows fly above, surrounding the sacrificial ground on the other side of the trees. At the center of the sacrificial stone altar lies the half-eaten corpse of the hobo, star-spangled over a stone table. An aggressive crow even descends on the corpse and picks at the remains. All this while, Roland sleeps deeply but twists and turns and moans due to the bad dreams he is having, courtesy of the devil grass he lies on. In his dreams, Roland is taken back to his days after the fall of Gilead. In his dream of memory, Roland Deschain is with his quartet mates, Cuthbert, Elaine, Jamie, and Thomas. They spy on John Farson's camp and plan to cause some damage by placing explosives. Roland and Cuthbert take the wires to sneak into the camp and set up the explosives, while it's Elaine's duty to light the fuse. As Roland and Cuthbert sneak in, two of Farson's men paint each other in blue, and their discussion is almost ironic, if not coincidental. They argue over why Farson has made them just sit around, as if waiting for the enemy to sneak attack. Apparently, Farson's camp is laid with booby traps to alert them of intruders. Farson's soldiers wish for the enemy to try something so that they can just chop off the heads of the trespasser. Roland and Cuthbert quietly set up the explosives and listen to the conversation. One of the soldiers feels sorry for the enemy, who don't stand a chance, but begins every day as if they do. Meanwhile, Jamie, Elaine, and Thomas get restless as they have to wait long for Roland and Cuthbert. However, they didn't have to wait long. Although Bert and Roland have set up the explosives, Roland's foot touches a rope, which causes a bunch of pots and pans to bang against each other. The clang-clang of the utensils alerts Farson's men, and they wonder if it's just the fox. Roland's friends get ready for a shootout, but there is no need for that as Roland and Cuthbert ambush the two soldiers. While one of the soldiers bites Cuthbert's finger, Roland kills the other one. As Cuthbert lets go of him in pain, the soldier alerts others about the gunslinger. The soldier is stopped short when Jamie shoots him from behind. However, Jamie gets scared as shooting from the back is considered to bring bad luck. It doesn't really matter at the moment, as the camp has already become aware of the intruders and rushes towards them while Roland helps Cuthbert to get up. Roland signals Elaine, and the trio on top of the hill starts shooting down at the soldiers to get their attention. The trio has also lit the fuse, and within moments, a massive explosion kills several of Farson's soldiers. The surviving barbarians fire at the gunslingers, and one bullet hits Elaine in the arm. Jamie also gets shot on the legs, while Roland and the injured Cuthbert join them. Roland rallies his friends and asks them to follow him despite their injuries, because let's face it, staying put is not an option. The gunslingers take a narrow passageway through the mountains, which slows down Farson's barbarians. Roland orders his friends to leave as he plans on taking down all the guards. Cuthbert refuses to leave his friend alone, and so, with their usual banter, Roland and Cuthbert shoot at Farson's soldiers. They take a position on a cliff and start shooting rocks down, triggering an avalanche. Chapter 2, Phantom of Gilead. Somewhere else, Eileen waits for the young men as she entertains Shimi, while Randolph sleeps beside them. Shimi and Eileen indulge in random chit-chat as both secretly worry about the gunslingers who have gone on a mission to attack Farson's camp and are now late to return. The gunslingers eventually return, and seeing Roland arm in arm with Cuthbert, she thinks that Roland is hurt. However, Roland is the only one who somehow remains unscathed. The quartet soon gets down to tending the wounds. Roland pulls out the bullets from Jamie's legs while Elaine helps bandage Cuthbert's arms. Roland orders the quartet to get ready for travel, and Eileen asks why they are not staying for a while to help the injured recover. Roland points out that staying there could be dangerous, and leads his friends towards the mountains. Most of them walk and carry their packs, while the wounded either ride the horse or are dragged by one. As they walk, they suddenly spot the ruins of a castle, and Cuthbert falters as he starts bleeding through the bandage. Roland realizes that, despite the dangers, they need to camp and give his friends the rest they need. He suggests taking shelter in the ruins they have just spotted, unaware that it is one of those evil grounds. As they reach the ruins, Jamie asks the others to set up a fire so they can cook for everyone. Cuthbert rebukes Jamie's cooking and suggests Eileen can cook instead since she is a girl. He rightly gets smacked by Eileen, who points out that Shimi is the best cook among them and can do the job. Eileen is proven right as Shimi cooks for everyone, but he feels something off about the ruins where they have taken shelter. This place It stinks of poison, Shimi points out. Roland assures him they are enough to handle whatever evil lurks in the castle's ruins, and asks Shimi not to worry about it. Roland suggests everyone get as much sleep as they can, but Shimi stays awake and keeps guard. As he stays awake, Shimi becomes a witness to and part of the event unfolding there. Roland suddenly finds himself dressed in a suit, attending a party, but can't remember how he got there. He is accompanied by Cuthbert, who is with a woman, whereas Elaine munches on a big piece of meat. A woman asks Cuthbert to ignore Roland and asks him for a dance, but Roland reminds his friends that they were in the ruins. Elaine argues that they were invited, but when Roland asks who invited them, he cannot remember. Elaine asks if it's a dream or a group hallucination, but Roland is not sure. He notices shadow-like beings in the back with their eyes glowing like demons, while a cowboy leans on a tree watching it all. Roland looks around and everybody is busy making out with others. Someone even kisses Shimi, and he seems to enjoy that. Roland suddenly realizes that he is the final piece, but the final piece of what? Shimi starts crying, and Roland decides it's time he talks to the cowboy, because he is all that matters. As Roland approaches the cowboy, he is suddenly back in his gunslinger attire, and everyone else is gone. However, in a sudden twist, the cowboy turns out to be Roland's late father, the Din of Gilead, Stephen Deschain. Stephen holds Roland's face and opens his eyes so that he can see more and see with the eye of the dead. Stephen tells Roland that he and his friends are in deadly danger. Shimi can, and it is his cries that brought Stephen's soul to help Roland. With a sling in his arms from his last moments, Stephen shows Roland that ghouls have come out of the ruins to feed on the helpless bodies of the sleeping gunslinger. Stephen advises Roland to blow the horn of Eld, which will wake him up. As Roland blows the horn in his dream, he wakes up and thwarts the ghoul of his body. He now picks up the real horn and blows it again in the real world. The sound of the horn wakes up Roland's friends, but they are confused at first. They thwart the ghouls and arm themselves to fight the deadly creatures of the dark. However, bullets don't seem to kill the creatures, and so out of instinct, Roland again blows on the horn of Eld. The sound seems to irritate the ghouls as one of them jumps back on Roland, but Roland punches the ghoul in the mouth. He slams the creature with the horn, but the ghoul still seems to fight back, albeit more slowly. Roland sounds the horn a third time, and now the horses respond. However, it's not the hoof of the horses of the gunslingers, as the horses that now appear are spiritual and appear out of nowhere. The gunslingers look in awe as the ghost of Arthur Eld, accompanied by his knights, comes clobbering through and sends the ghouls back to where they came from. In a true display of heroism, Arthur Eld pulls the reins of his horse and sounds his horn one final time before they are gone. As they leave, the dawn comes, and Roland's friends are fully awake now. They face the warmth of the sun and feel good after a long time, while Roland smiles. The same cannot be said about the older Roland, who now wakes up to find the crows still hovering in the sky. He follows the crows to find out why they have gathered, and discovers the body of the hobo lying facing the sun. Roland stands for a while wondering who the man was and what happened to him, but then leaves after covering the hobo's face with his hat. As Roland rides off towards the rising sun, he remembers Arthur Eld and his friends, who are all gone. So fell Lord Perth. This is a one-shot story and the last chapter of The Dark Tower, the Gunslinger. It begins right after the Battle of Jericho Hill. Roland has just rescued Eileen from the pile of dead bodies of his friends. Although she would not make it, Roland tries his best to keep things positive and take care of Eileen. She reminisces about the spectacular fight and notes that it will go down in history as the Battle of Jericho Hill. Roland asks Eileen not to speak and save her strength, but Eileen knows that she is done for. She coughs up blood and admits it was all worth it. Roland assures Eileen that he will get her to Gilead, but Eileen reminds him that it's a 3-day ride and she might die very soon. Eileen feels sorry for Roland that he has to continue to fight alone. However, Roland tells her about Arthur Eld and how he alone defeated Lord Perth. So even if one man remains, there's hope. Eileen has never heard of the story, and so Roland proceeds to tell the story as she lives her last few moments. Once upon a time, Midworld was the most dangerous and lawless place. It was a time when Arthur Eld had not yet freed the world from harriers and mutants. In this story, Arthur Eld is just a young boy. He lives in the place where he was born. It is a small place called Topeka in the Wildlands. Roland locates it somewhere between the barony of Crescia and the distant land of Garion. When the story takes place, Topeka has suffered some damage thanks to the Harriers and mutants who have exploited and plundered it. It was a time before guns were used and the only weapons citizens had were boiled oil or good old-fashioned arrows. However, young Arthur was not in the thick of it. He was a mere herder who spent time caring for the sheep, and as per the stories, he was quite bored with it. No one knows what he brooded about during those leisurely hours looking at the ship, but things changed one day. One day, a saddled-up wolf crept up on the sheep, and Arthur was lost in his thoughts, generally unaware of it, until his pet bumbler alerted him to it. By then, the wolf had already killed a few sheep. Although the bumbler was only intended to give Arthur company, it gave Arthur's spirits a boost as it attacked the wolf. Meanwhile, Arthur ran and jumped on the nearest tree to get a clearer shot at the wolf. The wolf was either too distracted by the ferocious bumbler or too busy to eat the sheep, so he missed Arthur taking his position. High atop the tree, Arthur loads up his sling and shoots it at the wolf. It only makes the wolf angry and it tries to climb up the tree, but the bumbler bites the wolf's leg, allowing Arthur to reload his sling. This time, Arthur is successful as the stone passes right through the wolf's skull. The death of their leader makes the other wolves run away, and that's when Arthur notices smoke arising in the distance. He realizes it's not from a single fire, but a number of them. He also notices the saddles on the wolves and deduces that the smoke must be from a campfire set by the riders of the wolves. However, this could only mean trouble for the folks in his town, and so Arthur decapitates the wolf. He takes the brave bumbler affectionately and decides to warn the people. Arthur leaves the bumbler to guard the sheep and returns to the town, only to learn that a messenger has returned after checking on the fires. The scout tells the townspeople to start running. He has spotted an army of 1,000 soldiers, belonging to one Lord Perth, gathering at the border of their town. Apparently, Lord Perth and his army have raided several other western towns. He has either slain the people or forced them to join the army. Arthur spots his mother in the crowd, who berates him for not looking after the sheep. Meanwhile, the townspeople start debating their next course of action. While one suggests clearing out the town, others ask if they are only delaying the inevitable. One man suggests hiding, and that's when Arthur yells out about the wolves and wolf riders. He tells everyone how the wolves will sniff out the people from hiding and hunt them down. The townies refuse to believe that Arthur has killed a wolf and call him boastful, but Arthur has got the proof. He shows the decapitated head of the big wolf to the townspeople. Arthur takes some of the townspeople to where the body of the wolf lies, and they finally believe it. The town leader orders a man called Lucius to take 3 of the fastest men to take a closer look at the scout and inspect Lord Perth's encampment. Arthur assumes he will be one of them, but the leader orders Arthur to get back to work. Perhaps the leader is Arthur's father or just a well-wisher, as he doesn't want to risk aggravating Arthur's mother or Arthur's life. Arthur doesn't find it fair, but the man says that he can let Arthur get killed and leave his mother unprotected. As the adults leave with the dead wolf, Arthur sits down to sulk, accompanied by his friend Bertrand and the bumbler. Arthur and Bertrand oddly resemble Roland and Cuthbert. Considering Roland is a descendant of Arthur, it's possible that Cuthbert is a descendant of Bertrand. The 14-year-old Arthur and Bertrand are not ready to put up with the adults and decide to secretly follow the scouting party. Lucius quickly gathers his fastest friends and then, with their stealth skills, crept up to Lord Perth's establishment. What they notice is enough to instill fear. Lord Perth has got tanks, hordes of wolves, and an array of enemies' heads on spikes decorating the border of the camp. The scouts notice how Lord Perth's soldiers are treating the captured people as slaves. Anyone who falters or falls is tortured or slain. Lucius and his men believe it would be insane to fight Lord Perth's army. They stand no chance against the monsters and wonder if they can hide in the forest and wait it out. A foolish plan indeed. Thankfully, Arthur is not afraid. He and Bertrand join the scouts and again remind them that the wolves will hunt them out. Arthur points out that so far, God hasn't really heard their screams of terror, so they are on their own. He suggests getting a closer look and finding a weakness in Lord Perth or his men. Arthur was definitely a man of action, as he didn't waste time and rolled down the hills to get a closer look at the camp. He moves stealthily without making the slightest bit of sound, creeping behind the soldiers and guards. Arthur overhears Lord Perth speaking about how easy it was to conquer Midworld. Perhaps he came from another world or time. One of his men hails Lord Perth as the future king of Midworld, while another suggests that they should conquer other worlds beyond Midworld. Speaking of Midworld, did you know that Stephen King was inspired by Tolkien's works? Well, there were definitely a lot of similarities and references. Anyway, Lord Perth drinks to his men's words and asks them what awaits them in Topeka. They inform him that it's a few cities enough for a few dozen soldiers. Lord Perth suddenly hits the slave girl who was serving him a drink. Apparently, she is from Topeka. She recalls being captured from another town when she was visiting a friend. The girl's head is shaven and she does not wear a top. Lord Perth steps on the girl's head for sharing too many details. Arthur couldn't bear the barbaric attitude of Lord Perth and spoke up as he picked up a rock. "Delay this, you sick son of a bitch," Arthur says to himself. Arthur yells at Lord Perth and brandishes his slingshot just as Perth attempts to get on his wolf. "What in the world?" the tyrant exclaims, along with a few expletives, but Arthur doesn't hear it and concentrates on hitting Perth's knees. Arthur has seen Lord Perth walking and has found that he has weak knees. The stone that Arthur slings hits Perth right in the knee and he slides off the wolf, accidentally dragging it. Perth forgets to let go of the reins and instead his head strikes the ground and the neck snaps. The panicked wolf attacks the soldiers and within a moment, the war is won by the people of Topeka. The stunned soldiers are unable to move, which allows Arthur to escape. Hours later, a small Topekan army arrives, but Perth's army is gone by then. So you see, Eileen, one single man can be responsible for the fall of an entire army, if he knows where to strike, says Roland as he finishes this story. Eileen finds the story charming, but she feels sleepy. She hopes to dream of Roland finally defeating Farson's army and restoring order. As Eileen lies down on Roland's chest, he tells her that her confidence is not misplaced. Roland promises to someday find the Dark Tower at the end of the world and stand in its field of roses. He promises to call out the names of his fallen comrades, starting with Eileen, and together they will watch their friends and Gilead rise from the ashes. The last panel shows an older Roland Deschain standing alone near the field of roses, but whatever else he promised will never happen. Roland's journey might not have had a desired ending, but we have come to the end of our tale. The series offers groundbreaking work in narration and graphics, but what lingers are the stories of different men and women. Although this comic can be a bit preachy at times, it makes up for it with well-developed characters.